commentary to the members of the Village Council, which was done of that meeting, and you'll have the same updated information that I do. So that concludes my report for today. Maybe we'll start with Jane. Do you have any reports to make this afternoon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think everybody's heard by now that the Holly Arts Fair is going to be going forward, which is wonderful news. We managed to get approval for the reduced version that was described last time in our work session from the Health Department, and it's going to go forward on this coming Saturday, the 17th. So that's a wonderful thing, and many thanks to Katrin and the Pinehurst business partners who all worked on putting a plan together, and to Mark Wagner and the people in the Parks and Rec Department who helped them and presented it to the Health Department. That's great. The Beautification Committee met yesterday, and Lydia and I together have asked them to please come up with a short list of projects that they feel would be helpful for adding sparkle and so forth to the village as we get ready for USGA to come, so that we can have that list in time for our retreat and that input from them. We think that would be very helpful, and they're going to be doing that. So that's great.
Judy?
I'll pass, thank you.
Okay. Kevin?
I was at the Partners in Progress presentation on real estate. It was interesting, including a possible change in military designation where you do not have to move physically to the locations you're stationed that they're discussing, which could have an impact on our real estate market. It's kind of confusing. It means that they would give them temporary housing and the whole family wouldn't move. They put some emphasis on that. Would you agree? And but I went to the TARPO meeting, and I don't think I'll be able to communicate. TARPO is our Triangle Transportation Organization that deals with funding of roads, and they have changed the formula, and it doesn't favor us in some respect. So the group is trying, especially our voting representative is the mayor of Foxfire, and I think I'm going to have to give it to you in a written memo of what the changes are and how it'll impact us. But some prioritization changes that has to do with they're shifting money towards safety and less on freight movement because of some things that have occurred. It sounds good to me, a shift towards transportation spending towards safety. But somehow, numerically, it might have hurt us a little bit, but I think in the long term, it might be good. So I'm trying to meet with Matt Day and try to get a memo to everyone to understand the net. But I wanted you to know it's a pretty important meeting, important transportation meeting still going on, and that's it for me. Thanks.
Kevin, that's very interesting. Thank you very much for that. Lydia?
Three things, short. First, John, I want to thank you for bringing to our attention the full-page ad that the USGA purchased in Pine Straw magazine. Were they announcing their presence or showing their appreciation for what they were doing? But if you haven't seen it, look at Pine Straw. It's very impressive. Second thing, Jane and I met with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee yesterday. Good group. One thing they're going to do is prepare a report to council of things that they would like to see done. And we've encouraged them to look at the results of the community survey to see what the community wants and possibly tie their desires and wishes into that. And then the third thing, this goes along with the, if you see something, say something. In other words, if you have a concern, staff can't do anything about it unless you tell them. Over the weekend, a resident of Pinehurst emailed me and told me that there was construction noise next door to him at 5:30 on the weekend mornings that he wanted to have stopped. I reached out to Darren. Darren jumped right on it. On Monday morning, the builder or contractor or whomever was called, the problem has gone away. I saw this resident who brought the issue to my attention. I saw him this morning, and he was amazed that we acted so quickly. He said, "I didn't know politics could work like that." I said, "It's not politics, it's our amazing staff." So Darren, thank you. He was really, really happy with what you did, and thanks for going to the trouble you did.
Lydia, thanks very much. Seeing no other comments on reports from the council, we'll move on to item number 3 in our agenda, which is the consent agenda approval. Before we do that, though, I'll ask, is there any member of the council that wants to discuss or pull out for further consideration any of the items in the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda, please?
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
Motion by Judy Davis. Is there a second?
I second that.
Second by Kevin Drum. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. We'll move then into item number 4 on today's agenda, which gets us to a point which we love to have at our regular meetings. It's a way of honoring citizens who've been working on committees for us, or in other cases, persons who've otherwise affected the village of Pinehurst in ways we can't even imagine all the time. And in this case today, we have a resolution to read to Mr. David Sinclair, who has retired from his position at the Pilot newspaper, but covered Pinehurst for many years. And David, if you would step to that microphone, I'll join you there. Okay, I want to make sure I'm heard. Thank you, Lori. David, it's my privilege to read this to you. I know you've had some view of it already, but nevertheless, it's from the heart. This is a resolution honoring Mr. David Sinclair for outstanding service and dedication in the coverage of the Village of Pinehurst local government news. Whereas Mr. David Sinclair, a resident of the Village of Pinehurst and a native of Moore County, began covering local government meetings in 1984, and whereas Mr. Sinclair has been a faithful front row attendee at village meetings of all varieties and an early adopter of viewing council videos as soon as posted, and whereas Mr. Sinclair, with a lively wit and inquiring mind, has informed and enlightened the residents of Pinehurst with great skill and dedication for many years. And whereas Mr. Sinclair may indeed take pride in a career well spent as he embarks on the next exciting chapter of his life. And whereas the Village Council of Pinehurst, North Carolina wishes to acknowledge and express its appreciation to Mr. Sinclair for his outstanding service and dedication to keeping the citizens of Pinehurst well-versed with breaking news about their community. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Village Council of Pinehurst, North Carolina, in a regular meeting assembled this 13th day of October, 2020, as follows. Section 1, that the Village Council hereby congratulates Mr. Sinclair on his successful journalism career and extends to him sincere best wishes for continued success and happiness. And Section 2, that the village manager is hereby directed to have a copy of this resolution presented to Mr. Sinclair as a token of our gratitude, dated this day, 13th of October, 2020. I get to give it to you, not Jeff, but thanks very much, David. That's for you. And I have to say that all of the people sitting in front of you and everybody sitting around you and behind you are very sincere about our wishes. Thanks to you for covering us so well and our wishes for the future. Now, another person who couldn't be here tonight, but who you know and knows you well, wanted to acknowledge your continuing interest in the history of Pinehurst. And recently, for our 125th anniversary, Jack Farrell wrote a series of articles, as you know. And he's actually had it printed into a small book. And he wants you to have this. He couldn't be here tonight to do it, but that's for you, from him, and all of us. Thank you.
Say a few words, please.
I'll tell you, I've not been behind a microphone in about 20 years.
Yeah.
Even though I did get I looked at that online. When I heard that read, I'm going to tell you right here. So first off, thank you guys. And I'm not going to do anything to make the meeting any longer than it needs to be, because I've been over there where Mary Kate Murphy is. But I do want to thank you guys. This one's special because I live in, you guys know I've been a resident of Pinehurst since 2009. But when I got that first news director job, actually in late '83, my very first department was on Dundee Road, right across from where the Catholic Church is. So I was there for a few years. But anyway, I will tell you two things, and you already know this, but because you guys know this is a special place, and it is to me too. I love Pinehurst. I love living here, and now I get to work here. And I come to work in the casino building. That's where the village offices used to be. So George Wood was the village manager back in '84. That's where I met him. When I met a young whippersnapper named Andy Wilkinson in '87, that's where I met him. He was only 2 years older than I was. I couldn't figure that one out. And now I'm working in that beautiful building in the middle of the village. I was telling Jane and Judy, I set my route to come into work every day down Carolina Vista. I love it. Every day I feel like I'm so lucky to be here. And the other thing, over the 36 years that I've done this, I've obviously worked with a lot of people, with local governments and everything. But I got to say, these last 5 years or so, when the pilot put me back out covering this beat, in particular, with everything that was going on, I just got to say, and there's a couple of them here, you guys, without a doubt, have got the best staff. And it's been so awesome working with those guys. I can say that now. Objectivity goes out the window. But a couple of them, Jeff Batten, I knew him when he came in '86 with Southern Pines, and so I've known him the whole time. And Mark over there, we got to be good pals during the community center construction. And then the last few years with the comp plan and the library study, Natalie's been my best friend. She's done a great job. I just want to say that publicly. I mean, she made sure, because I couldn't be at everything. I tried. But, humanly, I have other beats to cover. But she made sure I had what I needed. And I've just appreciated that both personally and professionally. So thank you guys again. This is very special to me. And I look forward to this new chapter in my life and being right here. And I told Jane, I said, if somebody had told me 36 years ago when I started out in this career that someday I'd be retiring here, which I plan to do, I'd say you're crazy. But I'm glad I stayed. And again, thank you so much. This means a lot.
Thank you, David.
Did you have to use those big type boxes back in '84, and we'll type and line them up? Or? Hope we see more of you, because at least we got to see you when you're covering us. We got to see more of you.
You'll see me in the village,
Yeah.
Yep.
I did not know that.
Now we'll move on to the next item and get into our formal business for the evening here. Item number 5 is discuss and consider an ordinance amending Chapter 92, nuisances of the Village of Pinehurst Municipal Code. Jeff Sanborn, you've been working very hard on this, as we have for some time. Please make your comments and report.
Sure, and I don't know to what degree you all want to discuss the language any further. I think we've got it pretty well settled out to what everybody agreed was appropriate. And I'd just like to note that the one significant change that we made based on the last discussion was adding the effective date of 1 December 2020, so that our community has an opportunity to adjust to this. With that, if you have questions, I'm here to do my best.
We have been through it, but there may be a few questions. Jane, do you have any questions on this ordinance?
Can I make a motion?
Are there any other questions from council?
I just have
Kevin?
a point I wanted to make. It was most important for me to get the input from the it's just the chief, I needed that input in order to approve this. And I thought we agreed too, that it'd be a learning curve. And like with the historic document, we talked about updating it. We're gonna look at this the same way with collaboration with
We're
the
gonna have to
chief.
get it out there and see
Yeah,
how it shakes out.
and I agree, but I mean, you'd agree that we're gonna have a learning curve. We all agree with that?
I would expect that. I mean,
Because that's what I,
it's possible that we're gonna find out through implementation that, for example, we've got the decibel limits about right, and it works out fine.
It won't be perfect,
Everybody stay
yeah.
happy, but, I mean,
we'll be able to
it's always the
collaborate.
case, we're looking for improvement, and if we find that, for whatever reason, there are aspects of this new ordinance language that can be improved upon, then we should be doing that.
So there is going to be a collaboration process with the chief on how to, this process is working and how it can be. Absolutely. Thank you. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a very important point. We'll learn as we go along. Are there any other questions on this
So
nuisance ordinance? Judy?
So we had a note from a citizen, and I also had a conversation with another citizen that we talked about, but we did not include anything about drones. And so I hope that we're still looking at that and trying to sort out, you know, to what extent it could be part of this, or it should be part of a different ordinance, or what exactly the game plan could be.
I remember talking about it, it coming up from a citizen. Is that what you mean? I remember talking about it specifically.
Yeah, we talked about it at one of our meetings, and then we had a citizen note this week, and then I had a citizen comment from someone on my street as well.
It should go,
Important topic, it's a different set of chapters or paragraphs in our municipal code. So I think it's appropriate to have that, continue to have that discussion to figure out what an appropriate approach would be. But I don't think it really ties to this,
Okay.
this update.
And staff will bring us something at some point about what to amend or how to address it.
Yeah, I mean, we have not, for obvious reasons, we have not looked at that seriously yet, but it's on the list.
it could cross this because of noise, but I understand you're saying it's
Probably not.
privacy.
Probably not 40
Noise is not what
dB.
people are concerned about.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying technically it could.
Yeah, probably not as much noise in the case of drones as nuisance in other ways, privacies and that sort. So it's a little bit different part of the kettle, I think.
Safety, privacy,
Trespass,
safety maybe, and privacy.
trespass.
Yeah.
It's more privacy, I think, is a central concern.
You haven't seen me drive a drone.
You haven't, what?
Would
John,
it-
I had one question just to get the answer on the record. Has Mike Newman approved this actual draft of the ordinance?
I don't know that he approved the effective date, but he approved everything before that, yes.
Okay,
Send him a copy. He's seen it.
okay. I just want to get the answer on the record. Thanks.
Yeah, and I remember he did raise a comment in support of this
Yeah.
a few weeks ago, I think. We were on that draft.
He was here when we last talked
Correct.
about it, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
The effective date. So if he's okay with the effective date, it's,
yeah. And the effective date will be December the 1st, so we have time, as Kevin's pointing out, with the police department to work on issues of getting it out there, and then we'll see how it goes. Good. Is there a motion to adopt this ordinance?
I move to approve ordinance 2013, amending Chapter 92, nuisances, environmental protection of the Village of Pinehurst Municipal Code.
That's a motion by Jane Hogeman. Is there a second, please?
I second.
A second by Judy Davis. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you all very much. That's a good step for the Village of Pinehurst.
Thank you to Jeff and others for working out all the
Yeah.
mechanics.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's move on to item number 6, presentation of our fiscal year end 2020, June 30, 2020 financials. Brooke, welcome. I notice all the books you're carrying with you.
Just in case.
Just in
Only
case.
yes.
And at least I think we all know that there's probably no question you couldn't answer, even without looking at the book. So thank you very much. We look forward to your presentation. Go right ahead.
Sure, absolutely. So
tonight we have for you the unaudited financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020. I do want to emphasize these are considered the unaudited financials. Although the audit fieldwork has been completed, our auditors are in the final stages of reviewing our financial statements, or our CAFR. We don't anticipate any numerical changes at this point, although that could still occur through those final stages of review, but I would not anticipate anything material. Full financial statements will be presented to you all in December by Dixon Hughes Goodman for the official presentation. But this is to allow you to get an update in advance of that. So the village ended the year in a strong financial position with our fund balance above the council's policy range as planned and our debts at reasonably low levels. Our operating expenditures are in check and revenues are continuing to grow at a moderate pace, even in spite of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic and the impact that that's had on our local economy. From a financial position standpoint, our general fund revenues exceeded expenditures by about $3.4 million this year, bringing general fund balance to $11.2 million. To compare that with our third quarter estimate, we anticipated an increase in fund balance of only right at $2 million. However, that estimate did not take into account all the projects that were delayed due to COVID-19, as well as just some other delays that occurred. So this year we did have a pretty significant roll forward amendment or reappropriation amendment of $1,057,000 that was reappropriated into the fiscal year 2021 budget. Recall the rescue truck was kind of the largest piece of that, but also a piece of land for the fire station and a few other large purchases that were not completed by June 30th. And so that was contributing to part of that variance from our expectation of $2 million. The Community Center Capital Project Fund balance ended at around $249,000, and construction is substantially complete as of June 30th. There's just a few last items to kind of clean things up and finalize the project. So combined, the village's fund balance increased by around $1 million to $11.5 million. As you will also recall, the village's fund balance policy requires us to maintain an unassigned general fund balance of at least 15% of actual expenditures and total fund balance of 30 to 40% of budgeted expenditures. And as of June 30th, which is our measurement date for the fiscal year, the general fund had unassigned fund balance of $7.3 million or 42% of actual expenditures. And general fund balance of $11.2 million represented 51% of budgeted expenditures. For comparison, our population peer group is at the 56% mark for that. I do want to mention too, our level of 51% does include the return of the $1 million from the Given Memorial Library capital expansion campaign, and it also includes the $1 million from the reappropriation, so the $1,057,000 is included in there as well. Cash and investments at June 30th were $10.9 million compared to $10.3 million last year. It's about a 6% increase. We earned about $179,000 on our investments, 1.39%. However, even compared with that, in March, interest rates began to drop. The Fed reduced the rates to a target range of 0 to 0.25%, and we are seeing interest rates reaching that level at this point. Our outstanding debts continue to decline. We decreased those by $299,000 with a total debt outstanding of only $142,000. And as you all know, we have budgeted in the fiscal year 2021 budget to pay off those remaining debts. We'll discuss that at the work session as well, just because that was something we deferred past the first quarter, but there are plans to pay those off. Our capital assets increased to $51.2 million. It's an increase of $3.6 million. And the most significant additions this year were community center construction in progress. We had a solid waste vehicle replacement. And then we also had the routine replacement of 5 police vehicles. 3 of those were in the routine replacement schedule. 2 of those were a roll forward from the previous year, so that's why there were 5. From a revenue and expenditure standpoint, revenues were $252,000 below our year-to-date budget projections. Our normal variance is around 1% above, but of course, the economic impacts of COVID-19 are the reason why we fell a little bit below, but still very reasonable. So I'll cover some of the main revenue source declines. Property taxes were below by about $20,000, and that's just due to slightly lower motor vehicle tax collections from March to June, nothing to be concerned about. And we did end the year with 99.92% of our levy collected. Excellent collection rates again. And it just illustrates our community's commitment to pay their property taxes on time. So we're very lucky. Sales tax revenue was $129,000 lower than budget, but this was after the mid-year adjustment that we increased sales tax revenue. If you'll recall, we were doing very well after the online sales tax collections, and just we were having a great year through about March when COVID-19 came into play. And so we were only 2.7% lower than our adjusted budget. And if you look at the total revenue source, we did increase year over year. So if you look at our total sales tax revenue from 2019 to total sales tax revenue for 2020, there was an increase. Those distributions decreased from March through May, but they did rebound in June. And we'll go through some of that detail in the work session as well. Athletic and recreation programming fees were about $79,000 below budget, and that's just due to program cancellations. We just couldn't host the same programs we had planned to. Fair barn revenue was $70,000 below budget, same reason, facility closures. We had to close the fair barn, and we were not able to rent it out the last 4 months of the year. And then investment earnings were $29,000 below budget, and that was after we had again adjusted the budget upward because we were doing better than expected until that point. Some of those decreases in revenue were offset by decreases in expenditures, primarily in the recreation area. So for example, the recreation programming, although we didn't have the revenue coming in, we didn't have departmental supplies, purchasing things for these various programs, didn't have the same part-time staffing or for example, a yoga instructor, we didn't have to pay those individuals because those programs were not being held. During the year, the village, I do want to mention this again, did receive the return of $1 million from the capital expansion campaign. The larger portion is related to general fund expenditures, which were $4.3 million or 19.6% below budget overall. And that's related to 4 key areas, and I've covered a few of these. But the first here, we had to budget last year a contingency appropriation of $1 million as a budgetary technique to return the $1 million that was coming from the library to fund balance. Because as you know, the state requires a balanced budget, which means revenues must equal expenditures. And so that is why we had this $1 million in contingency funding that we had no plans to spend. It was just something we had to do to meet that statutory requirement. The second area is just due to reduced spending those last 4 months of the year related to COVID, program cancellations. We had lots of special events, unfortunately, that we had to cancel in the spring, and due to facility closures. Salaries and benefits were $866,000 lower because of employee vacancies. We had some retirements. Also, as I mentioned, reduced part-time individuals too, like in recreation, for example, just not using those individuals like we normally would during the spring, summer time period. And the fourth area, capital expenditures, were $1,077,000 below budget, again, primarily due to the rescue truck that was on order. And we did have 2 parcels of land that were included in the budget that were not purchased by year end. In total, 47% of the general fund budget for capital outlay was expended. The majority of that was rescue truck, fire station land, and the Magnolia Streetscape improvements. And we did roll forward all of 3 of those projects into the next fiscal year. And in total, capital expenditures were down by only $45,000, so a pretty flat year for spending. From a financial outlook perspective, we are anticipating some revenue decreases as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, and we'll cover some of that in our work session as well, but related to these same categories of revenues, primarily in the recreation realm, just for the first quarter. So, unemployment did increase to 7.3% compared to 4.5% at the same time last year. We did add 189 new homes last year, which was very significant, especially if you compare it to the previous 2 years of 122 and 144 homes. And this year we have issued 45 permits so far for the first 3 months of the year. In terms of Fair Barn and Harness Track, Fair Barn covered only 53% of their operating expenditures this year compared to 82%. Not surprising, given that we had to close the facility, unfortunately, in March to comply with the governor's gathering restrictions. And then at the Harness Track, they covered 51% of operating expenditures compared to 48%. So while the pandemic shut things down for a lot of our areas, we actually had some trainers and horses that were on site who requested to stay past the training season. And so we were able to collect some additional revenue, about $30,000 in monthly stall rentals, to keep them on site. They had nowhere to go. A lot of the facilities that they normally would train at or race their horses were closed. And so we were able to accommodate them during that time. So in conclusion, fiscal year 2020 ended better than we expected, and we are well positioned to carry out the initiatives in the fiscal year 2021 strategic operating plan. The effects of COVID-19 were slightly less severe than we originally anticipated, luckily, but we are continuing to monitor the impacts of that as we proceed into fiscal year 2021. If you have any questions about the quarterlies, I'll be happy to answer those for you.
There may be a few questions. Anyone from the council have any questions of Brooke on the fiscal year-end 2020 reports? Kevin? Nope. Jane? Judy? Lydia? Excuse me, Lydia, you need to turn it on there.
We get the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award and the ICMA Certificate of Excellence. We've got that over here. And as Jeff just said, we learned a lot about our process through Baldridge. How much of what we do here is reflected in these awards, or how much do these awards reflect the work that you do?
Well, as you know, the CAFR, the financial statements, are the culmination of everything that we've done over the entire year. So it kind of goes back to our strategic planning process, and this is the direction that you all set for us to move forward in when we established the budget and the strategic operating plan. So they're very linked. This is basically just telling you the numbers behind what happened and what actually occurred throughout the year. But during the budget process and the strategic planning is when we set where we are moving toward for the year and what we want to accomplish.
Okay. Well, we hear about the awards you get, and that's great, and we hear that we get them year after year, and we're one of a few municipalities that get these awards, and then we see this, and we'll go, well, how is this reflected in what we do? So that should give the public a lot of assurance that these are good numbers. So thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Judy, you had a question, I
Yeah,
think.
I was just reflecting on your comment about the number of housing starts in the first quarter. So we're on track to come close to the last year's number of 189, 180 right now.
At
If
45%
you
of our
kept that
total
up.
100 homes that we initially anticipated
Yeah,
or
that-
projected,
yeah, if
which
that-
was a relatively conservative projection too.
Yeah, but I mean, this run rate is interesting.
There is a little bit of seasonality to that. There's a lot more construction activity in
This
the
time of
non-winter
year,
months.
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, there's kind of a flurry of activity where we're trying to get it done in the good weather. But I think you're right, we're headed in that same general direction.
Yeah, and the only thing, it's not a question to Brooke, it's like, we weathered the storm, we got through this sales tax thing. It seems like there's a lot of value, and you can get value in capital expenditures right now. When people aren't spending, you can get better value with your capital right now. So I hope that we're gonna have a discussion on how we could leverage our capital position to save the public money. Because it just seems like there's a lot of value when you have the money to pay for stuff, when people aren't selling stuff. So I hope we're able to take advantage, not in too big a way, not too aggressive a way to make us uncomfortable, but I hope that we're putting ourselves in position to get these capital projects done. Because I feel like we're in that position to do that.
Kevin, I think that's a good point, but if you're talking about capital projects principally, and therefore construction, this sort of thing,
Well, I'm just talking about, we have, well, there's a fire engine we didn't purchase, and maybe that's a set cost, maybe because it's custom design, maybe that doesn't fit into the value ratio. I'm not talking about outrageously large sums,
Right.
but when not many people are buying, and you have the capital and you're buying, that means you can get better value. It's just a general statement.
Yeah.
And I would, if I was in a good capital position at a company that I ran, it's not a company I run, so I would take advantage of the marketplace if I had the capital that we have right now.
point taken. Just a reminder for everyone in the room and those who might be listening, Brooke's been talking about our fiscal year end, which was June 30, 2020. But in the work session, which we'll go to in a few minutes, we'll be into the current fiscal year and some changes, perhaps reflecting some of Kevin's thoughts that we'll go over at that time. So with that, I don't see any other questions from council members for you, Brooke, but thank you. We will see you in just a little bit longer time.
Thank you, Brooke.
Is there any other business that council wishes to raise at this point in the regular meeting? I have to say that in the work session, I have some thoughts about discussion points for other meetings into the future, but we'll do that in a work session context in a little bit. But anything for tonight for business discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to comments from attendees. We don't need a sign-up sheet tonight, but are there any attendees here who would wish to make comments? Yes, ma'am. Please, yeah, right there.
Either's fine.
And you might wish to point that down a little bit and make sure that it's working for you. And I'll make sure we have you recorded there. You can speak. I think it's already on. Yeah, should be already on. Thanks.
Okay. Hi, my name's Debbie Layler. I live in the Old Town downtown area. I sent you all a letter yesterday. I hope you all received it. I apologize for the very strange spacing in it, and I can only blame heavy editing in my computer. My apologies. I wanted to first thank you so much for the changes on behalf of my neighbors in the downtown area, the changes to the noise ordinance. That's really very wonderful. And to ask if I missed the earlier discussion, I apologize for getting here late. We're thrilled that this is Highway 5's year for the CMS traffic study. That's terrific. Has that been scheduled yet?
Yes.
I think
trying to
late, I think
Didn't
October.
we, I think Jeff Batten mentioned October,
October was
November
the month,
broadly
Yeah.
before, Jeff, but yeah, sometime before the calendar year end. But,
Before the holidays.
right, but his point on that was, as I recall, correct me if I'm not, council members, it'll be in a time in October, November when peak, more or less peak traffic is happening. And
School
it'll-
buses
in
are
session.
running.
Yeah.
Schools and buses are running, and
Yeah.
high season at the resort, all
Yeah,
those,
yeah,
all
that
those
too.
good things bringing people to town. We're very excited about it in the Old Town area, and especially for those people living on that side of the downtown area, because we recognize the twin destinations of the golf resort and the hotel, and also the downtown area are primary destinations for vehicular traffic. Not only locals, but also people visiting the resort, which, as we know, has enjoyed growing success over recent years, spurred on by their own actions and also the growth of the increase in the VRBO short-term rental market. We're very concerned specifically about the intersections of Ritter and Azalea Roads, Shaw Road Southeast, and McKinsey with Highway 5, because people turning onto those roads and coming into the downtown, Old Town historic district are either going to a destination, in which case they might be going the speed limit, or they are taking a shortcut trying to avoid the traffic light at the intersection of Highway 211 and Highway 5. So we have got our eyes on this study, and we are thrilled because those of us who live there recognize both the growth in traffic and the increasing incidences of speeding. We also recognize that along with the growth in the market of short-term rental houses on both sides of Highway 5, and also changing demographics, many more young families with young children, non-vehicular traffic in this area and along Carolina Vista have grown enormously, whether it's bicycles, segways, skateboards, you name it. And it could be even just tourists on bicycles, you know, as in New York City. They're driving around with their heads up here, and cars are trying to take shortcuts through the village. And happily, I know a lot of action is reactive in the sense that where there have been no accidents, it's unlikely to get support for a change. Those of us who live there have seen plenty of near accidents, and so I'm here to sort of express that view and that hope that as part of the traffic study, consideration will be given to the increasing conflict between vehicular and non-vehicular traffic of all kinds. Well, I know he is, but you all and the village planner have got the option.
And this study that we
I
contracted for
understand.
is
He's
all
a car
about
counter.
vehicular traffic at the intersections on Highway 5.
And that's all he does. Okay, is there a way that the village would countenance citizen observers to sit, for instance, in Marshall Park to augment the car counting data of CMS Engineering by counting those cars which are going either direction, Shaw to Carolina Vista, around and to Highway 2, or vice versa, coming the other way. And to say, I mean, how much of that is local traffic and how much is people just taking a shortcut? Right now, Google Maps, when the traffic backs up, is recommending that as a shortcut, and it is causing problems.
There's a much more efficient way to do it, and it's in our projections. We have in the budget this year to purchase or renew or repurchase our license for a big data platform called Streetlight, which allows us to do some pretty nifty traffic analysis, but we can literally go zero into an intersection and define the inputs of an intersection and outputs of an intersection and figure out where traffic's coming from, where it's going to. We have not yet purchased that license.
Well, is that something we should speak to Brooke
It's
about getting into the budget? Is this one of these items, as Kevin was just saying, that now that we've got money?
It's in this year's budget.
Great, that's terrific. Can I carry that news back to my email list of neighbors? Okay, terrific. I will let them know, because otherwise people are going to be sitting out there with their lawn chairs and a soda. I think he went left, I think he went right.
Jeff, you said it's a software called Streetlight. Is that the name?
Yes.
Called Streetlight Data. We had this license
Yeah.
back when we were contemplating the Western Connectors discussion
Okay.
for a year, and we found it really is powerful. Now, it won't give you absolute numbers because not everybody has a cell phone turned on in their car when they're traveling, but from the standpoint of figuring out relative, percentages of traffic levels that might move through a road segment or through an intersection and be coming from and going to different destinations, it's very powerful.
Thank you.
Exciting. That's exciting. Various of my neighbors have suggested alternatives such as making Shaw Road a no left turn off of Highway 5. And bearing in mind something another neighbor said to me, which was, for every action you take, there's going to be a reaction. If you close people off 5 from turning left on Shaw, they'll back it up to Ritter and Azalea, and now they're barreling down Carolina Vista looking for a shortcut to 211. So one of the suggestions that was raised in the letter was whether the village would, whether the council would consider an overall reduction in the speed limit in the historic district or in the downtown area, or you can describe whatever you want, bounded by 211, 5, and wherever you want, down to like 20 miles an hour or something like that as a village-wide solution, given that apparently the village does not want to issue any speeding tickets in any significant sense. They're currently priced at $5 with a $50 penalty misdemeanor for non-payment. The money goes directly to the county, so there's not much incentive for the village to pursue, and also you risk alienating and irritating your visitors who are your bread and butter. But nonetheless, if the village is to address speeding, it needs to think about it on a the council needs to think about it on a village-wide basis. Increase the penalties and start enforcing it, get a bad rep for a little while until people realize they're going to get a $50, $100 ticket, and then maybe the word would get out and they would stop doing it. This is your bailiwick. These are the alternatives that we've come up with that we see as possible. The other, this is not part of the traffic study, Jeff, but we were also wondering whether flashing yellow lights, similar to the ones that are on Morganton, might go on the crosswalk at Ritter. There's a lot of traffic coming, a lot of foot traffic coming from the west side of Highway 5, renters and short-term rentals, kids, people walking the Greenway. I know it's not legally enforceable, but it is a good visual warning to people that there are people making the crosswalk there. I know it's
We have made that suggestion to DOT. I think that their preference is to look at the Highway 5 corridor holistically and to incorporate such an improvement if they think it's appropriate in the redesign of our section of Highway 5 that unfortunately has been delayed because of their budget situation.
And John and I were at that meeting. I feel they were very receptive.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's just nerve-wracking. We were trying to figure out how to accelerate it. We came up with all kinds of creative ideas. But I feel it's a very positive relationship with DOT. And they listened. And they even looked at, the biggest takeaway from that meeting, had them put them up on a map and show Highway 5 bisects the village. And I don't think they really saw it that way before, like it's a bisection. And I thought it was pretty effective for him to understand why we were there, because it's looked at to him as a state road, But there's that little section from Morganton to 11 that is really a bisection of our village, so.
if you look at those two major roads as intersecting,
Right.
basically right in the middle,
And the reason I'm telling you this is that was last year, that meeting. It wasn't like last week. But a lot of things have happened since last year. I just think, I think there's reasons for optimism. When it comes to DOT and all this, and I know it's difficult, but I feel like we're on the same page with the present group of people there now.
Deb and council too, yesterday in BPAC, this specific request was brought up. Some sort of blinking light at that intersection, because more and more people are crossing from that side of Highway 5 into the village. Cyclists, strollers, joggers, walkers, visitors.
Children with noodles around their neck, no parents on their way to the swimming pool.
So I don't know if there's anything that we can do to advance that cause, but this was something that was specifically requested yesterday.
Jeff, I'm wondering too, in answer to this question, would or would not DOT take the data we collect in the Highway 5 study into consideration, or do they do their own from time to time? But they would
Certainly,
use that.
For example, when we referenced in that meeting,
Yep.
the data that we collected on Highway 211, and those intersections, and are concerned about the gun club intersection, they asked us for that report. So, yeah, they certainly will take that into consideration.
And it's worth saying that they're updating their report that's been delayed. So there's a new traffic study done by them as well.
I don't know to what extent their periodic annual
Well, it's on
traffic
our
count
committee.
data collection has changed. I have not heard that reference before.
They're using the different software. Remember the
Yeah.
software changed?
Yeah, there is, and I don't remember the name of
I
that.
guess
Yeah.
but so I think we're gonna have a mixture of inputs. They moved to that, Natalie will know what it is. That new
It's
system.
a different name, but-
That new system, traffic name, that they tested it up in Sanford. And now they're reapplying it because there was a request to update that data here. And they are updating it, and it would have been out by now without COVID-19, but it'll be out later this year.
I think there's two pressures here. The pressures at DOT is due to COVID and kind of DOT budget and issues going on all over the state. They're having to cut back doing things. On the other hand, just in Pinehurst, and looking at this one stretch of the road, we've got the Bicycle and Ped Plan Committee and core neighborhood people and others looking at the same issue of traffic on Highway 5. So I think that heads things in the right direction. And as Kevin and Jeff said, there was a kind of meeting of the minds in some of these projects when we saw DOT, which was probably in January or
I don't remember
February,
saying
and
that before, meeting of the
that was
minds.
that. But this is all well to the good, and we appreciate the neighborhood's concerns. You have some other points, though, Deborah?
I did. I gather my suggestion that we reduce the speed limit was not well received. I recognize there would be a certain cost with replacing all the speed limits around town. I mean, it seems to me like there's been a proliferation of new 4x4s sunk in with 25 miles per hour on them. So clearly there is a perceived problem.
Are you talking about the state roads as well?
No, downtown area.
Yeah.
Downtown, Carolina Vista, Barrett, coming into town on Barrett. There's a lot of speeding on there. Yeah, just local downtown roads that people are either shortcutting or they're late for their tea time. I don't know why they're speeding. But people complain about the resort vans as well. People sliding through stop signs. There's just not a lot of traffic enforcement in the area, and I don't believe I've ever seen a car pulled over and given a ticket. I mean, it's certainly not given a ticket, but pulled over and warned or anything like that. So I just wanted to reiterate the point because the last time I brought it up a few years ago, Jack Farrell said, well, how about 24 miles an hour? That's what they do in Annapolis, and that kind of makes people pause and think about it a little minute. My observation is most people drive 5 to 10 miles an hour over the speed limit anyway. If you want a 25 mile an hour speed limit effectively, you drop it below that, and that's what they'll drive. So, okay, my last thought is, we brought up before the question of drones, whether that will be a subject to be considered in the nuisance ordinance. Have you already discussed it today? Sorry.
Got it on
Yes.
the list of things to.
Great, okay.
When we passed the nuisance ordinance a little while ago, a question was asked about how we can fit drones into that. It's a different animal, but we are looking at that, and this is a helpful follow-up to your
Okay.
memo too.
All right, thank you
Counsel.
so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Are there any other attendees who wish to speak to the village council tonight about any issues? I'm seeing none. So we can move to a motion to adjourn to move into the work session, which will be quite important tonight, given the financial plan we're going to discuss, as well as other issues. Is there a motion to adjourn the regular meeting and move to the work
I
session?
move to adjourn the regular meeting.
Second?
Motion by Kevin Drum, second by Judy Davis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? That motion carries, and we'll move into the work session.
Mayor, can you pause for just a second?
Yes, ma'am.
She's got to switch the video over to work session. Take just 1 minute.
Well, it's 5:31. We'll take a break to 5:35.
What's the name of that?
Good afternoon. We'll resume the Village Council meetings of October 13th, 2020. This is a call to order for the work session meeting. We have a couple of agenda items to discuss today and also some looking ahead plans for future regular and work session meetings as to issues we want to discuss. The first order of business, item number 2 on our agenda, is discussing revenue updates for the current fiscal year 2020-2021. And Brooke is here to make that presentation, Jeff. Go straight to it? Good.
Yes, please.
Perfect. And I was speaking with Natalie as well in relation to what Ms. Laylor was mentioning about the street light data that is included in the budget for that as well. And she mentioned that we are waiting to purchase that software until the transportation planner, until that position would be hired. That would be one of their responsibilities, and that would be under their purview. I just wanted to mention that. So tonight we are here to provide you with a preliminary revenue update for the first quarter of fiscal year 2021. It's just for some of our more economically sensitive revenue sources. We have been monitoring these revenues very closely each month since the pandemic, and we just wanted to share the results with you. We'll have the official quarterly financial statements that will be presented in November, but this will give you an idea of where we stand. During budget work sessions, you all elected to defer some expenditures until the end of the first quarter, and that was a strategy that was used to mitigate some of the potential financial impacts in case COVID-19 caused our revenues to drop significantly below our expectations. And after reviewing the position of 3 of our most economically sensitive revenues that we'll touch on tonight through September 30th, actual revenues are approximately $100,000 better than we expected. Therefore, staff is requesting your approval to move forward with those planned expenditures that were originally deferred until after Q1. So as you can see, the list of items there, just as a reminder of what was deferred, the accelerated debt payments for making those final fiscal year 2022 scheduled debt payments and moving those forward to 2021. Streetscape improvements on Magnolia Road, postponing hiring the new transportation planner, and expanding the maintenance storage space. So as you can see down here, the summary of those revenue sources, local option sales taxes are obviously the one we were most concerned about, not knowing how COVID-19 would impact and how our economy would hold up. For July 2020, that one distribution, that's the only distribution that we've received in this fiscal year. We received it this month, actually. We were $73,000 over our estimate. So we anticipated a decrease of 5% for the first quarter. And so that first month actually came in at 13.5% higher than the prior year. Recreation revenues fell about $93,000 below, and then our permits and fees are running well ahead of schedule, as we discussed, with the number of homes that have been permitted, new homes already this year. So we were not sure at the time that we were finalizing the budget how these revenue sources would end up. So if you would like to take a look, Beth, if you'll scroll down for me just a little bit to the local options sales tax section, we can just take a quick glance at that and feel free to ask any questions you may have. So as you can see here, the first 4 months that are listed here, there is a 3-month lag in when we actually receive the local options sales tax distribution from when the sale actually occurred at the cash register or online or wherever the transaction occurred. So those first 4 are actually related to fiscal year 2020. However, you can still see the trend of what our expectations were and what the actuals ended up being. So for March, which is the first month that we saw a decline, it decreased 4%. In April, we only experienced a 0.7% decline. This is month over month from the previous year. In May, we had about a 16% decrease, but there was also a very large refund that the county had to issue to.
Thank you for explaining that,
Yeah,
because I
that's
couldn't
the
understand that anomaly.
Yes. And so they had to pay a large refund out to like a nonprofit organization or something like that that's requesting a sales tax refund. And then that basically lessens the overall pool that gets distributed to the municipalities within the county. And then in June, we increased by 14%. And then basically whenever those stay-at-home orders began lifting, then we saw more local option sales taxes come in. And then you'll see the 1 month that is actually in fiscal year 2021 for July experienced a 13.5% increase. So overall, if we look at the 5 months there, we're about $152,000 better than we expected. Any questions specifically about? Sure.
Jane?
Thanks. So we did not tweak our fiscal year 2020 sales tax projections, because that happened.
We didn't tweak the budget, correct?
Right.
Correct.
But we did lower our expectations for fiscal year 2021.
Correct.
So how were our July sales tax revenues compared to what we would have put if we hadn't tweaked for COVID?
Have to go back to what we thought before COVID hit. Normally we budget around 3.5% growth for sales tax, if I'm remembering correctly, from year over year. Now this year we possibly would have adjusted it differently because of the online sales tax and just seeing the additional growth related to that. So numerically, I don't know that I can give you that number, but it's probably a comparison of the 13.5 to 5. We would probably expect maybe about a 5% increase in a non-COVID environment. Is that what you're asking? Like, assuming COVID did not occur?
So, well, yeah, I'm trying to see what.
I thought we had
What you're
said,
saying is if we weren't in the COVID environment, what would we
this
have
mean?
estimated for July?
Yeah, exactly.
And how does that compare to what we actually collected in
and
July?
I have some vague recollection, maybe I'm making it up, that we took it down 10%.
Right, but it was 10% off these
But if we
adjusted
hadn't
estimates from the
taken it
previous
down.
months, right?
Right, so the 10%, we expected a 10% decrease. So what we did, we didn't adjust the budget, Jane, to your point. The budget did not change. However, we
2020.
revised our estimates for 2020. We revised our estimates because the estimates are what we build the next year on. So we still adjusted that estimate down 10% for April, May, and June's distribution. So those, we expected there to be a 10% decrease in April, May, and June. Then July, August, and September, a 5% decrease, and then 0% growth from quarters 2 through 4.
So we're rolling off a 10% reduction out of the fourth quarter, and then another 5%.
Right, that is what that is
15%,
exactly.
so
So
we're about
15%, yeah.
kind of flat is what it looks like.
Yeah, and so the percentage change in the estimate of 377 is the net number of that reduction?
Yes, 377 reflects a 5% reduction month over month, because we're estimating each month differently. And so we estimate each month separately, individually, compared to the previous month, because there's some seasonality in there, there's some fluctuation there. And so if you compare July 2019 to July 2020, that estimate of 377 is 5% lower.
So about I don't know, I'm trying to do it on the top of my head, but 39395, it was probably going to be, and we still exceeded that by a large percentage.
Yeah, I think maybe if I'm reading the table correctly, or if I understood the table correctly, Brooke, maybe the way to think about this is to look at that second from the right column, percent change from previous year. So in July of 2020, we collected 13.5% more sales tax than we did in July of 19. And typically, you would have budgeted about 3.5%, you said?
About 3.5%.
So 10% growth.
Yeah.
We did better by 10%.
Versus the
Then-
3.5% that we would have typically built into the
Outstanding.
budget, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
It's interesting to try and think about what actually happened to us in this wacky year. you
Yeah.
know?
I said this was going to happen, if you remember. And the reason I did is you're not going to Raleigh to shop. You're not going to Durham. You were going to shop at home. I explained to that in the heat of battle that I felt we would, I don't know if you remember that, I felt that we would feel equal or an increase. Do you remember that? So the anomaly is we don't get the tax if it's spent outside this county. That's the anomaly, in my opinion. Do you have any other explanation?
Versus shopping online, for example.
Shopping online
If you switch your
here,
shopping habits to online.
That's here.
Then your home is the point of sale.
yeah, that counts as here, though. I'm saying you're not going to Durham to the shopping mall, as my wife does, or to Raleigh. Is that the explanation?
And even not going out of the state as well. Like there's travel,
Yeah.
travel is not as prevalent during these time periods, during these months, out of state, some of those
That cuts both
restrictions
ways.
as well. And is that-
That cuts both ways, though.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right, not
Right, getting
coming
an
to
influx.
us or us leaving, that's exactly right.
It's
That's a good
tourist
point, too.
dollars.
So these should normalize as travel increases and comfort increases. So I don't know when that is.
Help me understand the statewide percent change. What does that mean?
Yes, so that is the actual, the total sales tax that's collected for the entire state of North Carolina,
Okay.
compared month over month. Just so you can kind of see how does our locality compare to the state overall. Because
July versus July or July versus June?
July versus July, year over year.
Well, to the whatever.
10% increase from last July of 2019.
We're a lot better off.
Right.
I mean, May was definitely a terrible month everywhere.
Yes, for our county, but as you can see there, the state was only a 4%
Right.
drop.
Yeah, but that was explained.
That was that special
Was.
reimbursement that the county had.
Was the refund
Yeah,
that
yeah,
had to be
I-
paid out by the county.
We probably would have been closer to the state numbers without that anomaly of returning tax dollars.
It probably would have been more distributed among other months, and it wouldn't be as skewed into that single month, right? Yep.
Brooke, part of the reason that we reduced our sales tax numbers in the budget was estimates from the state, and they were very severe. And we made our own decisions on that, as we've just discussed. What's the state saying now? Am I jumping to your next topic or so? And how do you think we should follow that?
Sure. They haven't provided a revised projection. They do provide quarterly updates,
Yeah.
and so they are reflecting on that as well. What they did mention, one of the pieces that I noted was the stay-at-home order. That was something that they noted in their observations when they look at statewide, that seemed to be a trigger when those stay-at-home orders began to loosen. That was about the time that sales tax continued to pick up a little bit. That was a trend that they saw. I think they are seeing the same thing that we're seeing, that perhaps it's not as long-lasting and not quite as deep of a dive as they originally anticipated. And we did pick a middle-of-the-road approach when we selected our budget estimates for that year. So it's still probably within their range because their range was so broad. They didn't know how to guide us because they didn't know what was going to
I
happen.
think they underestimated online sales and what happens in a nesting environment when you're nesting. I think it's an anomaly for those state auditors.
We're very lucky.
It's an anomaly for those state auditors. They don't understand the online sales tax. It's new. They've only received it for, 12 months? A year.
Yeah. every year.
And they didn't understand its impact. And to me, it was pretty clear what happens in nesting. Your phone becomes your shopper. And
Add to cart.
I think it was hard for 20-year auditors to understand the impact of online sales, as well as stay-at-home order. I'm not saying it's not a bunch of things, but But I'd sure like them to see if that's, I'd like to know their answer to John's question.
Right, to see what their projections and how they would adjust their projections going forward.
Well, key is though, what are we doing? And we need certainly information from the state, very important to that process, but we're doing very well.
Right.
Both with our budgeting and management processes, but setting these numbers were there. So what's the plan here? I mean, you made a proposal, I guess, that, I don't guess, it's right here, that we take these 4 items that were deferred and execute them.
Right,
Correct?
and proceed
Now,
forward.
I'm a little, from my point of view on that point, I'm comfortable, I think, with doing the debt payments, expanding the storage space. I still have in mind issues related to Magnolia Road that were pretty complicated, if I recall. I remember Jeff Batten talking us through that and what was going to happen or what could be deferred. So I'm not sure where I would be on doing that right now. And the planner position gets into issues of staff and the PDO and all these things we're still discussing. So that's really in play, I think, as well, as far as moving ahead on that. But so my thought is I'm comfortable with the debt payments and the maintenance storage space. I'm not quite sure what to do about the middle two. How does the rest of the council feel? Anybody have a view on that? Jane?
Didn't we switch that 250,000 for the streetscape improvements on Magnolia Road to the new sidewalks to go in by the school?
There's funding in there for for sidewalks in this year's budget as well.
Different budget. Yeah, there was a, in addition to the Magnolia Streetscape, we also had 400,000-ish in the
Originally,
It
I think it
template
may have been
originally
reduced.
for-
Yeah, it may have been reduced.
a generic placeholder for pedestrian facilities, and that's where that money was coming from.
Because I think, well, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee certainly felt it was important to move forward with the sidewalks around the new elementary school and going over to the community center. And I have it in my mind that this money was was
I don't.
moved over.
Two separate capital items. There were 2 separate budgeted items. So there is funding available for construction of sidewalks or
And we
pedestrian
deliberately did not
facilities.
delay that one because of the
Yeah.
concern we were
Correct.
hearing from the community.
So is that already in process?
No.
But Jane, we were told yesterday the money's there. They just haven't spent it yet, but the money is there, and they explained what they need to do to kickstart that, to put those sidewalks in before the school opens. So my understanding yesterday was what we discussed yesterday with funding those sidewalks is not related to this.
This is in the budget. This is just delayed. This is in the budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
then-
taking from Baldridge on the sidewalk question at the schools, there's an initiative action plan for $250,000 or so to work on that. And we've got about, we don't have quite a year to get that done, though, because the school will open a year from now or a little less. All right, so that's there. So that's a different number, Jane.
Okay, but then.
It's there,
Then the other thing I remember about the Magnolia Road streetscape stuff is that we did have questions about it. Yeah.
And how that might fit into the small area plan, which we're going to get to in a little bit too, I think. That's what I recall about that number. All right. So, well, how does the council feel about these 4 items? Because we're being asked to say, go forward or not, right, Jeff? That's what we want to do.
Yeah.
Lydia?
I have been a big believer in the transportation planner, but as I read Design Collectives, the work that they're going to do, I was wondering if there's some overlap, some duplicity, and I don't know the answer to that question, but they seem like they're going to do a lot, they're proposing to do a lot of work that I thought the transportation planner would do, or at least some of the initial research, so that...
Only in those small areas.
Is
We have
with-
transportation challenges
Yeah.
across the village.
Okay. So it's not duplicative, it's not, and what the transportation planner does then, let me state it the way I understand it, would fit in nicely, the transportation planner would fit in nicely with the work being proposed by Design Collective.
and not a conflict. I mean, you know, ideally, we find a person that can be not only a transportation planner, but a generic planner as well, and relieve the stresses that we have in our planning department right now, with commercial development, plan review, and all kinds of, whole host of other things. So, you know, there's a lot wrapped up into this transportation planner position that.
Well, and when I look at our strategic objectives and the balanced scorecard, it's something the public has continued to want. And Darren, I don't know how your staff does what they do. So again, I've been a big believer in it. I just didn't want to be putting money into something that might be duplicative of what Design Collective is going to do.
Well, I also wondered whether, if we're going to be hiring somebody, do we have enough staff for the permitting and inspections?
This position is part of the solution for that.
Next, are you done?
Sorry?
Are you done?
You have more questions, Jane?
Have any more questions?
Well, I might.
Okay. Of course. All right. Judy,
Go
I
ahead.
think you had your hand up too.
Kevin, go ahead.
Kevin?
Yeah, I want to approve all these. I think that we're at a precipice right now about to fall off the edge in the planning department. And, you know, it's great that everybody's achieving all they're achieving, but they could fall off a cliff if we don't give them support. They need more planners in there. And a planner with an emphasis on transportation is just a blinding glimpse of the obvious. It's just, you know, he has to be half planner. He has to be, you know, it has to be a planner and has to help the planning department. And this has never been named properly. I mean, names matter. This is a planner with an emphasis on transportation.
That's a fair way to describe it.
And this
We've
has
written
been
into the job
misnamed.
description a generic planning role as well.
And this continued misnaming of this position is causing us problems. This is a planner to help the planning department that has an emphasis on transportation, something that every piece of the public complains about. And
The primary role is a transportation planner. I don't know that we've misnamed it.
I think we're misnaming it.
We're trying to be holistic about our, you know, what we want to
You're
get out of
misnaming
this
it
person.
because it's a planner, and he can handle permitting when it's needed to happen in the planning department. He can help scale up the planning department. Do you not think so?
I said as much. It's a transportation planner, though. He has an additional duty and requirements to help in other ways in the planning, because
Okay, then
he's
you
going to
and I
come
are
all
agreeing.
with all the planning background that makes him a
You and I
functional
are
planner.
agreeing, it's just a naming issue.
You're in furious agreement.
So,
Yeah, maybe
I
Darren would have a
want to
comment.
finish, but if you want to talk about this, go ahead, then I
Darren,
want
you
to finish.
Would you like to carry on, Darren? Define that, please.
The one comment I would add is, when we're doing the analysis of that position, we had laid out how many hours a week that we thought this person would be working on transportation-related items, and then there was excess capacity built in there to do the things to help out in permitting, help out in other general planning and zoning capabilities. So yeah, the position itself is built with excess capacity in for general planning.
Sure. Okay. All right.
You know, a way to think about this is a transportation planner is a planner that has an area of expertise, but the same base planning education comes with that person.
Thank you. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
I didn't say it as eloquently as you did.
Correct. There's actually schools of in planning where there's emphasis in transportation, and a transportation planner will have taken a lot of transportation planning related courses, generally along with some engineering courses.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to go a step
Kevin?
far.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yep, carry on.
I'm going to go a step farther. I think we're going to need additional people in our planning department, and this is the obvious first step. So not only do we need this position, I think in the future we're going to need additional. So we need to get this one in here now. But to finish up with the rest of this list, the accelerated debt payments, I think in our cash position, it's very difficult not to pay that bill. So that has to be done. The streetscape discussion, I'm willing to have, but the sidewalk in its present form is not where all the amenities are. And it's causing a wandering of people across the street back and forth. So I do see a need of a sidewalk where all the amenities are. And
Yeah, I would also remind everybody
Yeah.
that in our updated approach to this streetscape project,
Yeah.
Drainage.
there's an intent to deal with drainage and also with parking associated
Yeah.
with the brewery.
so this deals
Wanted
with
to put
a
some
lot of,
on-street parking in that package as well.
but I'm not claiming to be the know-all if there is, I'm saying approve these projects. If timing means it should do this, this, or this, I support it. You know, speed it up, slow it down, medium speed. But approving this doesn't mean, it doesn't mean we have to greenlight it. It means approving it. And expand the
Example,
maintenance.
the design work still gonna have to come back to you on the Magnolia streetscape, so
Yeah, it's still going to be approved. We still have to approve a
get
piece of
down
this.
that road, so.
It comes back to us. And then on the expansion of the storage space, I just know the limitations that they have with storage space next to the police station. And I know what they've been going through. And it just seems in an organization in the position we're in, for them to be finding places to store stuff seems ridiculous. So I want to approve all these, and I think we're within 6 months of talking about an additional planning position. That's just my opinion. It doesn't mean it's right. But that's why I'm so bullish on these, but I'm pliable on this Magnolia Road, but we have to remind ourselves that it's drainage, it's parking, it's a sidewalk that connects the manor to the brewery. And all those people walking from town are staying on the same side of the road. The walkers going to the park are using the other one. It's not like they're not using the other one. The walkers going to Rassy Wicker are using that other side. But if it needs for some strategy for it to be slowed down, shouldn't stop it from being approved and get the planning done. So I think this is just, be the most irresponsible thing ever to not approve this planning position. I think this is like a dereliction of duty if we don't approve it.
Okay. Judy, sorry. Please.
I'll speak for the minority. I have a bit more bearish view. I don't think we know what we don't know yet with the economy. And I think that we aren't going to know till winter. And if at the end of Q2, beginning of Q2 next year, we'll have a much clearer idea. Given our current financial position, it's hard to say that we shouldn't spend $384,000. We've got $100,000 to the good, easily pick up the debt payments, which I would certainly agree with, and the storage space. I've been interested in the discussion about the transportation planner. That's a more fleshed out definition than we've heard in the past. But I think it's sometime next year, who knows, we might be looking at reduction in force. So maybe we should go get somebody that's got a transportation expertise, because we might have to let somebody else go, depending upon how the economy unfolds in the new year. So I'm just cautiously optimistic that this would be okay. But there's every chance that it might not be.
I think I'm comfortable with all but the streetscape improvements at that point, and I think we should wait and see on the streetscape appointments. Sorry.
Hey, Darren,
Improvements on Magnolia.
are you comfortable telling us what your greatest need is or needs are right now? If you're not comfortable, we're speaking for your planning department, and you're sitting right there.
I think the transportation planner is a great need, it was reflected numerous times as recommendations as part of the comp plan. I think you have a pedestrian and bike plan that has had that needs to get implemented. Some of the greatest needs in this community relate to the transportation planning realm. Getting across Highway 5 at Ritter, getting across at all those various intersections. I don't think there's been a solution identified yet. So I think that person could be working on that. In addition to getting, improving golf cart mobility through the community, increasing the greenway trails, and planning for that, planning to connect neighborhoods. So I think it is a great need. Are there other things? Do I need potentially another code enforcement specialist? Yes, we potentially need that, but that's something we do need to sit down and think through. But transportation planning is a great need, and it will upscale our department because it will give us additional capacity, additional planning capacity.
Okay. Now, as I look at this, did y'all say that Magnolia Road, that the design work is being done right now? What's the status? Oh, wait, what's the status of the streetscape improvements on Magnolia Road?
We did get some preliminary work done in the previous year's budget. We haven't brought that final plan to you yet.
I mean, what happens if
there were some? We had to work out some easement issues with the resort there around the Manor Inn.
Well,
I believe I recall hearing that that's all been straightened out and what we envisioned is possible, but we need to finalize the plan and bring it back to you.
There were some funds that were rolled forward from fiscal year 2020 that were incomplete and had not been spent and moved to fiscal year 2021. And we, by default, deferred those at the same time, knowing that they go along with this $250,000 here. So this kind of on hold until we proceed.
I mean, the way I'm looking at it, and to Judy's point, that 250 is the largest chunk of the 384. And listening to what Darren said and seeing that so many times we've seen the community, they want to be able to get around the village, the multimodality and all the other things we call it. But I mean, how about if we did the 52, the 22,750, and the 60, and then just sort of put Magnolia Road on hold for maybe another quarter?
Well, it sounds like we aren't ready to pull the trigger on the Magnolia streetscape.
Yeah.
The design will come forward to us, right?
Alternately, maybe what we should think about it this way. If you give us the okay to finalize the design work, we can be moving in the right direction.
Right, I'm comfortable with that.
That makes sense.
The stop sign on the construction work,
Yeah.
What's the cost breakdown?
design is not that much.
I'd have to pull the budget, though. I don't remember the breakdown.
Probably under
Right now.
25, 50K, yeah.
But if I'm pulling the information out right, there was already a lot of work done to protect those trees in the lower part of Magnolia, to move the drainage inside those trees, right?
So,
I'm trying to recall.
Yeah, I remember like a lot
There
of
was.
groundwork, a lot of
There was,
groundwork.
yeah.
Like we're not starting from zero,
Right.
but we are starting from a design zero. Yeah, I'm very comfortable with not pulling the trigger on the project, but be shovel ready.
To me, too, I think I'm still, with respect to the Magnolia Road projects, the issue of the small area plan, just, they seem to be all mixed, in my mind, as coming out at one time. So deferring that would be a good idea. Would there be a motion to approve the three items being accelerated debt payments, hiring a transportation planner, and expanding the maintenance storage space, but deferring for another quarter of Magnolia Road?
We shouldn't approve this in a work session.
Well, I think they're seeking guidance from us, and they can come back.
There really wasn't intent for you to make a motion and vote on anything.
Okay.
It's just a consensus to
Well, yeah, I'm
move
just trying to
forward
get
on the budget.
Because the funding is in
consensus
the
of the
budget.
idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
We kind of made a commitment not to approve things during a work session.
No, that's my point was, it shouldn't be a motion, it should be a consensus of kind of where we are thinking.
Yeah, I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the point I'm making is, I mean, it's already in the budget. You've already approved this
Right.
expenditure.
Right.
And we collectively agreed that it made sense to put these on hold. It doesn't require a formal motion and a vote by the council.
Because we already did it.
To move it forward. We're just engaged you on what things do you want us to move forward on spending money on?
and I'd just like to point out that 22,750 is really 100. $1,000 expenditure, because
22,750
that's a
was one
quarter.
quarter
of it.
savings, that's
Yeah.
right. And even if we post the
That's
position.
savings that's already been accrued.
Exactly, that has come to
yeah.
fruition because we
That's
haven't
a good
hired
point.
anybody.
No, I understand that.
right.
But the point is, it's not a 22,750.
Right, yeah, we're saying the same thing, yeah.
It's a much larger number.
Yes,
That's your
it's a
point.
real person. They want to be paid for the full year.
That's a worthy,
But for future years as well.
Yes,
worthy
exactly.
point, worthy
Five-year
point.
planning.
That's right.
So then
It's our
the
process.
consensus is to move ahead on the 3 items and to hold off remaining for another quarter, say, on the 4th item being Magnolia Road. Is that where we are?
I didn't
Yeah.
hear that. I heard design and hold
With
off on
with the
construction.
design, yeah. Design,
Move on design.
okay.
That's very reasonable.
With a caveat from the bear.
Excuse me, Judy?
Consensus with a caveat from the bear.
Caveat, that's right.
What's the caveat?
That I'm concerned about spending this money. You know, I'm just,
Yeah, I
Potential
like
for
that.
things to
I
turn bad.
appreciate that.
I mean, I'd rather say,
Appreciate
let's.
your bare instincts,
let's-
trust me.
Let's look at this at the pre-retreat, you know, but,
Yeah.
And we've got lots of fund balance to absorb.
well, yes, I understand that.
And
I'm just-
I think too, I agree with Judy, I'm not sure we're out of the woods yet. And on the COVID situation, I think it's becoming true that the sales tax issue we thought we might have isn't going to be as bad as we thought by a long way. And Kevin and others have mentioned the background to why that is. But we would appreciate, I think, a quarterly update, or as soon as you see trends, positive or negative, we're here to hear that.
Absolutely,
And that'll help us determine how to proceed on these other areas.
Absolutely, we'll continue to monitor it, and at this point, this was more or less just an evaluation of, okay, what was our budget? What did we actually
Right.
include
Right.
in fund, and what levels, what revenue levels funded those expenditures, and how well did we anticipate those with what actually occurred?
Right.
So I agree. I agree that we're going to monitor this each month. We're going to watch our sales tax revenues as those come in each month. I can continue to send updates as well, send updates to managers to let them know where those are coming in. And then we'll continue to monitor the recreation revenues, because that's another one of the areas
Yeah,
that
I wanted to get onto that. I
Yeah.
wanted to focus on the
sales tax.
sales tax and, well, on that, and also these issues of deferred, which we did. But are there any particular issues on items 2 and 3 and you wanted to draw our attention to? I think they're fairly obvious, but
They are, and I'll just briefly mention Fair Barn revenues. Of course, we had the facility closed for the entire quarter, so we didn't have any revenues coming in for that. However, I did speak with Mark, and we are able to reopen the Fair Barn now. It's considered a wedding reception venue and will allow up to 100 individuals in that facility. So as long as renters abide by the restrictions, then we are able to now book events, which is promising. And then recreation and athletic programs, we are beginning to register folks for those as well, and those are taking place too.
Do we have any bookings for the Fair Barn?
There are events, I don't know how soon, because
Mark's
it's
not
Okay.
here, is he?
We have actually had some that we've been working through this fall where there's some been some ongoing give and take about,
rescheduling.
kind of read the crystal ball about what the government's
Yeah.
going to say next. And
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
You think we're gonna, well, you guys think we're gonna see what's happening in like tourism? They're clumping things into the fall. Things are getting clumped together.
What do you
In
mean?
other words,
clumped?
they wanna have an event in that year, so they're gonna make it work. You think there's gonna be some catch-up? Mark's gotta answer. You can't answer this question.
I
Mark's
think
gotta-
only under governor's guidelines as far as COVID goes. And then, you know, and people, even under the guidelines, some people are going to want to be more
So he's
conservative,
allowed
some are more.
30%.
I think it's,
that would-
I think it's a
that
moving
would-
target. Just a moving target, and I'm sure Brooke will keep
I
us
would
up to
allow a
date.
wedding, 3 weddings I went to at the Fair Barn to occur are 30% occupancy.
All right.
Have we saved on expenditures for the recreational events that aren't occurring?
We have. It's not easy to quantify because it's all across the board in the staffing side, departmental supplies, things of that nature.
think about that as kind of icing on the cake in this story.
Mm-hmm.
We've also had savings in expenditures.
That's right. That's not
I'm
quantified
just
in
really
this
trying to
number.
get a handle on
Yeah.
what happened to us.
Right.
Because I imagine there's got to be some savings,
There definitely have been.
but does it parallel the loss of revenues, or is it greater, does it?
We don't know.
Right, it'd be hard to quantify just because, like I said, it is across the board in a variety of departments and a variety of accounts. But just reviewing the expenditure report, the events, because of course we've had to cancel a lot of our Live After 5 events, things like that. We're not spending money on those. So while those never bring in revenue, because they're free events hosted for the community, we have not spent those expenditures either, and those are not included in this figure of $100,000 to the good. You know, and so there's additional savings there as well on the expenditure side.
And we'll begin to see those in the quarterly,
Right.
every quarterly financial.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir, exactly.
absolutely right. All right, is there any other discussion then on this presentation by Brooke? Jane, did you have more questions? That's fine. Nope, yes.
No, I just am concerned about and having enough staff for permitting and inspections, because that list gets longer every week. It's unbelievable, you know. And there's a lot of planning we've got to do now. There is. And so where are we on?
That thought for the
Where are we
strategic
on
planning
one-
retreat. That's the time to have that conversation.
160D, where are we with that? Are we,
Behind.
well, then, you know.
That's a good point. And
We need to make sure we don't get ourselves in a hole.
Right. So let's hire that additional planner now.
Okay, but let's also keep track, because,
Yeah, I'm just saying, we have a strategic planning process. Let's use it. So hold that thought, please, and let's have that conversation in December.
all right.
Which,
any further comments on this discussion with Brooke? Otherwise, we can move on.
Okay.
Brooke, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to item number 3, discuss small area plan contract proposal. Darren, good evening. Thank you for being with us tonight.
I don't have my standard PowerPoint presentation for this tonight.
Can't hear
Oh,
you.
I'm going to remind you, yeah, keep that sort of at the corner there or somewhere, and then,
Yes, give me that.
good idea. Thank you, Beth.
All right, can you hear me now? Yes.
Darren, turn off the speaker to your left, please. I think that might help. And
All right,
I wonder, too, if the speaker behind you, maybe Lori could cut that off or turn it off from there. I think that's where we're getting some
some feedback?
feedback bounce back. Yep.
Yeah, I thought we turned me down, oh, there we go. We're good. Just don't pull up anything yet, I'll tell you. We'll see how it goes.
Lori, I'm still hearing a little echo as you have a chance. See if that can be controlled a little bit as you get back to your...
Can you do it? It's a minute. Why is this always with me? Testing, 1, 2, 3. How's that? Good?
Pretty good. A little bit there.
All right.
Just talk to the mic.
The mic never picks me up appropriately, though.
It will.
It's that soft-spoken Midwestern guy. What? All right. I feel I have to be eating it. Here. All right. Tonight, we're here to talk about the contract with Design Collected for the small area plan contract. Just a little background for tonight. This kind of emanates out of the 2021 strategic, you're going to hear some Baldrige here, some villages' 2021 strategic operating plan. It included an IAP calling specifically for the development of 2 small area plans. As a backup to that and as a forerunner to that, the reason it was in the 2021 SOP is that as part of the development and approval of the 2019 comprehensive plan, it called for the creation of 2 small area plans. One for Focus Area 2, which was Pinehurst South, and one for Focus Area 4, which is that village place area. If you can recall, I think it was about February, we started working on a small area, an RFQ for proposals. That was we issued that back in April. It's that long ago. We issued it in April. We worked hard on developing a scope of work. So the scope of work that was in this original RFQ generally has followed through into the contract that we're going to talk about tonight. We issued that RFQ sometime April 17th. Responses were due in May. After that point, we received 18 proposals from qualified firms. We narrowed that down to a list of about 4 firms that the council then, we did a mini RFP that the consultants responded to, and we held those interviews. We held those interviews over the course of a couple days, and at the end of that, we scored them. And the one that the council, there was a consensus on, and it was the clear consensus, was the proposal to work with Design Collective on these 2 small area plan contracts. So we've moved forward. We've had Design Collective. We've been working with Design Collective to actually develop the contract that you've been reviewing, and that contract lays out a scope of work. That scope of work, again, it goes back to referring to that RFQ with the added dimension of having the form-based area codes to it. So that was an add-on that we got during the process. The contract is comprised as follows: a scope of services, project timeline, that's Appendix A, a compensation fee, Appendix B, hourly rates, Appendix C, and terms is D. The proposed contract includes development of the 2 small area plans and form-based codes, and that is a base contract of $190,000. That is divided between the Design Collective team, and you got to remember this is a team of 3 different consultant groups working on various aspects of this project. Design Collective has the majority of the work as part of that, and as part of the overall plan development, and that's about $143K for their end of it. Dougal Real Estate Advisors, they're handling the market analysis element, that's about $26K. And then Ramey Camp as that transportation mobility element, and that's about almost $21,000. At the end of the contract, there's also some reimbursable expenses that we talk about, and then there's some add-ons, some optional add-ons, $5,000 for a PDO assessment. A PDO assessment is not an update to the PDO. It's just simply looking at the PDO, assessing it, and telling you, where you might be having issues relative to implementing various aspects of the plans, the comprehensive plan. And then there's, I think there was an additional add-on of, I think it was $10,000 to $12,000 for to create two separate reports for the small area plans. And that's because there's additional editing that's required if you want to develop 2 plans. So the total cost, if we take into effect everything, would be approximate with all the options would be $224,200. As part of our FY21 budget, then we've budgeted $150,000, which we have a difference if we did the entire contract as proposed with the options, would be about we'd have to find another approximately $74,200. Design Collective is proposing to get to the small area plans done in a 7 to 8 month time frame. You can see in the contract it lays out a schedule And they are ready to move as soon as we would potentially approve this contract. I don't have, we can just start talking about the contract. I know Jane's had some comments, and I know Judy's had some comments, so we can just open it up and talk about what kind of concerns we might have or what kind of discussion points we might want to have on the contract. Sure.
Kevin, you're offline.
Can you explain the two plan
Oh,
up fee that I don't quite understand?
Oh.
I need to understand that.
The two plans would be actually creating two separate documents. As proposed in their original fee, they would combine both small area plans into one bound document. To create two separate plans, there's editing. So they have to edit two separate documents, and that adds about 60.
It's interesting, but I wouldn't think I'd find that attractive, but because of the dramatic differences in the two pieces of property, I find that attractive. But I guess you're going to have to see what everyone else thinks on that.
You find what attractive, to have two plans or one?
Two.
To have two separate plans?
One is, smack dab in the middle of the historic district, and one isn't. And I would have thought that, my initial thought was, hell no. But now that you're explaining it to me, I kind of all of a sudden think it makes some rationale because of it makes it clear they're two unique areas. And then the other way, the only good thing about the other way is I want, the comment I made about the Highway 5 area was I wanted to be a relative of its historic brethren, and maybe if they're forced to be together, maybe they're more relatable to each other. That's the only positive I could see. But anyway, thank you for answering that.
Well, and it helps both in the adoption process when you're going through and adopting them. They might be being adopted at separate times, so having it in one document will sometimes cloud the review. So it just makes it easier from a review standpoint, and then also from an administration and future planning standpoint. You can point people to a certain document, and it's easier. It's easier to find information when you say it's in this plan, it's in that plan.
It's $60,000 to $80,000 though, more, isn't it, to do the two?
No, it's $10,200 to do the two separate reports.
The $60,000 to $80,000 was a range given in there for, I thought, the editing and all. So I maybe have that wrong.
No, the 74.2 is the difference between what we budgeted,
Yeah, sorry.
$150K,
Okay,
and
yeah.
the final number.
Correct.
Now that I got that answered, I'm now even.
I'm sure we'll all have questions. I'll just, I've been looking at this and reading this, and in the light of things that have happened since we first met on this subject back in the spring. We have the USGA project. We have had some unique and interesting planning and development proposals to us in the last couple of months, which have pointed out some needs in the PDO and things we need to be dealing with. And I looked down through this very detailed, and it should be, proposal, the contract, and looking at all these tasks to do, and I'm just wondering if all those things are still necessary. I'm struggling with the idea that we have a lot of information we've generated in the past, in the very recent past, from the comp plan on the one hand, and in other years on at least the Village Place area. And I'm just wondering if there isn't a better way to take advantage of that information, to take advantage of our council, planning board, and staff to accomplish some of these things. It just seems like it's gotten to be a very large project, larger than the name small area plan would suggest. Not that a small area plan is to be small in any way. We want it to be good, and that's everybody's objective. But I have to say, I'm struggling with the number of things that have to be done, including some of the public engagement factors that, to my mind, at this point, with at least Village Place, probably Highway 5, we've got that information. We need to kind of move ahead. So that's where I'm coming from tonight, trying to evaluate what the way forward is and how the contract works to our advantage or not. Those are my opening comments anyway. Anybody else have comments on the contract?
I have comments.
Jane?
I agree with what you're saying. I think we already are in a position as a village, as a council, to say, what is the basic outline that we want to see in each of these two areas? What are the densities, the scales, the types of uses? And I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel by having a bunch of more charrettes and Lego block exercises and all that kind of thing and asking people all over again. I think people become weary of all of that stuff, and we should save their willingness to participate for, what I'd like to see is for us to set the basic framework of the kinds of things we want to see. And for example, I was dismayed to see in the contract, in the traffic teams section, talking about a new gateway from 211. I thought we had been pretty clear that we don't want to have a direct connection from 211 into the village center. We want to keep that separate. So what I would like to see is the council, based on the information we already have, to set the basic framework for what we're looking for and ask the consultant to come up with 2 or 3 options for each of the 2 small areas to actually plot those things out. I don't want to turn the whole thing over to the consultant and ask them from scratch to start all over there again and say, well, gee whiz, wonder what we should put here. And I don't want to end up with a proposal that we pack out those areas as densely as possible. That's not what the people of Pinehurst have indicated over and over and over again that they want. And I see that, a propensity toward that in the contract. So I'd like to keep better control. And I'll tell you, I was very upset reading through the contract from that viewpoint.
And
I want to keep the control with us. You know, we've learned a lot about how consultants work over the last couple episodes of different consultant efforts. And one of the things is we need to be able to identify what we want and be able to direct the consultant and not the other way around. So.
And I don't know where that's coming from because that's not the way the process works. The consultant works for us. We provide that direction to the consultant.
I don't see it in there.
Well, that's how the contract worked. They're responsible to us. And the aspect that we're packing it with development, no, that still remains to be seen. We have a comp plan that has.
It shouldn't remain to be seen.
Well,
we already know we don't want to do that. We're not trying to attract.
And I didn't say we are.
Additional development
we're
here.
trying,
we're trying to manage those areas so that they end up not being adverse impacts on what we already have.
Correct. We're not in disagreement. There has to be a process that follows
This
through
process
to the plan.
Not the optimum process.
May I ask a
Let's
question?
get some other points out here. Lydia?
I had asked Natalie, copied you guys on the email, you've been involved in these, Darren, you've been involved. I can look at this and think, wow, this reads well, and it seems pretty thorough. And Jane, I've said all along, I think what goes in here needs to be what the public wants, not what we want. But I don't, I'm sorry, what?
Public's already spoken.
Not necessarily to this,
Not that level of detail.
not this level of detail. And I've thought about that too. For the comp plan, to me, that was big, broad concepts of sort of what they wanted to wear. And this gets down to the detail, which, and, you know, Darren, something in your memo that I really starred. I mean, to me, it was kind of bottom line. These are two areas, we've got growth pressures, vacant or redevelopable land. If we don't, Kevin, you've said this before, if we don't get ahead of this, we're going to lose control of what goes in here and what goes in here. But I'm not qualified to determine what should go. I mean, I would like to know our best practices, your best practices for what should go into a contract for a small area plan process. And I don't know, Natalie, I don't know if you can speak to that. Darren, you can speak to that. And you know, in my email, I said, what has worked in the past? What hasn't worked? What would you like to see this consultant do for us? And is it reflected in this contract?
We're going to stop there for a minute? Okay.
And Lydia, I'm not proposing to take the public out of the equation, but I think that we already know generally what we're looking for, and we need to express that to the consultant and say, instead of just starting from scratch and saying this could go anywhere.
What do you mean?
And we should, as I put in my little memo, I said around, frame it out as to what we're basically looking for in each of these two areas with densities and scale and types of uses and so forth. And then have the consultant come back with a couple of different options for what we in general are looking for.
But
and those options can then go to the public.
With regard to the...
And the other thing is, if we're trying to get out ahead of some of these development pressures, we should be updating our PDO. We've got a list, and we should be working on that, which is why, you know, I'm asking, do we need to have the ability to do that with a staff person?
Which staffers?
On our team.
Which staffers?
So Lydia, you had a question though to
Yeah, I do.
Natalie and Darren
What-
about that. And let's
what
do
have
that.
you learned from your experience, our experience?
Share my experience first, then you can share your planner experience. As an assistant manager who has worked here for 20 years, what I have observed in the past is that the issue that you're grappling with right now has always been there. It has always been, can we do it ourselves in-house? Do we have enough information? Do we need to hire a consultant? Can we just kind of, get through it on our own? I have seen us have very useful recommendations from consultants that previous councils have totally disregarded. Consultants have been fired that when we go back and we look at the recommendations that they gave us, Darren looks at me and says, that's exactly what we need. Here it was. They gave it to us in 2012 and we fired them. Like, but this is what we need right now. And so I think, from my perspective, I mean, I think that while it is difficult to manage large community-wide planning projects like a comp plan, like a small area plan. And it's difficult because of the engagement that it requires. It's not difficult from a planner perspective. I mean, if you were to sit down and just say, here's the map and I know exactly what I want, so I'm going to put it on the map. That's an easy exercise. But when you try to figure out what a community of 17,000 people want, and you tried to build consensus among a group of 5 who may see things a little bit differently, that's what's hard. That's the hard part. The planning concepts are not hard. Writing form-based code is not hard. Drafted a PDO.
Oh, you got a job, Natalie.
Not doing that, so.
Cannot do that in-house.
I mean, that's a technical exercise.
Yeah,
Technical,
Yes.
skilled technical
Requires
people.
capacity, but we have people that could do it.
Right.
We need a
Right.
landscape architect, but
Yeah, yeah, but it's, you know, from my perspective, it's, we have a cancer center, we have a school, we have a USGA coming, there's development just backed up. And we're not able to be as responsive to their needs right now as we'd like to be, much less the list of amendments that, I mean, we had a long list of PDO amendments 5 years ago. It still just keeps getting longer and longer because there's no staff. There's no time to be able to do the things that need to get done. And that's where you use the expert and the time that a consultant can provide in order to move things forward. So
For clarity, and on this point where you just put a period before you got to the next paragraph.
Oh, did I?
In answer to Lydia's question. I'm not against consultants, and particularly in these two projects. We need help to do that. My question in looking at the contract and going through all the tasks, and I made little notes on every one of them, is that there seem to be things we're allowing them to do that maybe we already know and that have come out from the comp plan. And I don't see enough tied back to some of that data, including the previous plans and even the marketing analysis that was done several years ago that certainly needs to be updated. I'm just concerned we've created a larger use of the consultant or project here than we really need to move it along and to get it done in a fair period of time and in a complete way. So I'm not against using a consultant. It just seems we've got a lot of stuff in the contract that they're going to do that kind of takes us down roads we've seen before. I think that may be somewhat of what Jane is saying too, and I don't know about others. But Lydia, I did want to, you've got a question on the floor here too, so.
But something you said ties into something Jeff said, is what level of detail do we not have that they would need? I mean, and do we have sort of going to what Jane is her concern, some of what they want or need, do we already have, and what more do they need? I think I'm tying into...
Before you answer that, can I just jump in? Because
yeah.
The notion, which is not incorrect, that, yeah, we do have a good body of evidence of what the community desires. And there's no better way to convey that to whoever we hire, and hopefully it's these folks, since we've been through this process, but to do this, than the comp plan. And any other supporting materials that went into the comp plan. Anything else, I mean, if we think that we collectively, whether it's the council or council and staff, can better collectively describe that to them, I don't know if I would agree with that. There's a wealth of information in the plan. That's what they need to stay grounded to.
Yes.
But then this question of detail, and I don't know if you're talking about detail about what the public desires or detail of the product. And
well, I think, to me, they need more detail for them to do this plan, is what I'm hearing.
About what the public desires.
About what the public
wants. What's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and mixes, and how
What's
things would work
economically
together.
viable.
And then going back into the market data and research, is it even viable? Does it work? Does it have a reasonable expectation of success?
Yeah,
And that is detail that's not in the comp plan, right? So you do take the comp plan, and that's your foundation, and then you talk to the, I mean, John, maybe this is what you're saying. I saw all the tasks. I thought, man, this is complete, and is any of this redundant, and is there too much in there, and could that be simplified a little bit? But I don't know this process well enough to know if you can simplify or distill that down into fewer tasks at lesser cost.
And I think, Jeff, to your point, market data is clearly one of the things we would want to go in spades on this, to really look into
We
that.
don't have that capacity.
Right.
More
Judy?
expertise.
So
Yeah,
one of the
we don't have
things,
that, right. Judy?
one of the things that I think people are searching for is a way to jumpstart this process without having to go back to ground zero to some extent. I mean, we could all probably take, a scenario plan and color code it you know, of retail and office or, you know, single-family residential or open space or whatever we want to characterize it. But I think that's the concern that this timetable presents, is that the belief is that you suspend your belief that we know what we might want in our community, which is not useful, to Jane's point. We have certainly got it now, the 2019 plan, some different ideas, and now maybe it's a way to craft alternatives out of what was there and use that as a jumping off point. You know, rather than, well, do you feel like a fish today, or would you rather go up on the top of the mountain? You know, all that stuff that you do in different kinds of charrettes. So I think people might be looking for something that's a little more focused and pointed alternatives, rather so open-ended.
Yeah, as opposed to, here's a clean slate, what do you want here?
Yeah.
But like the 2008 Newport Master Plan envisioned this. You know, what about in the 2019 Comprehensive Plan says this? You know, how do these two?
How do you make this happen?
Yeah, how do you make that work?
In detail, how do you make this happen?
Yeah, how do you make that work?
And we're not starting with a blank slate. We're starting with, part of the process is the consultant also comes in and looks at all these background documents. They read the Newport Master Plan. They read the
And if you had a task in there that says, after reviewing all these things, they're going to show us 3 alternatives. And that's going to be the jumping off point for the discussion. That would make people, I think, feel that we're taking the information we have, getting it internalized, and now we're ready to start going. But it feels like we're just going to start with charrettes.
So make sure I understand your point, Judy, I think what I heard you say was you might like to see the contract worded in a way that said, review all of the previous planning background documents and the, you know, analysis of the existing land use provided. Present a few options that might be viable, and then take those to the public to massage, as opposed to, here's a clean slate, what do you want?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, they're doing a lot of these stakeholder interviews and all that sort of happy stuff. Yep. And not that you would want to skip over that, but make it a more focused dialogue. You know, we've come this far in all these years, and now we have, you know, multiple options. And can't we somehow expedite this process because of all the pressures that we have from development and everything else, so that we can find a way forward?
Yeah, Judy, that's a helpful description. Kind of on the point that I'm trying to find. You did it well. I know Kevin wants to speak. Kevin?
Go ahead and finish.
Excuse me?
Go ahead and finish.
No, I'm done.
I'm going to be a while.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm just clarifying my point. I'm interested in people's definitions on that. Go ahead.
I'm frustrated. We wrote the RFQ. We told them exactly what we wanted. In the RFQ, we said, review all the previous plans. That was added by Lydia. Okay? In the RFQ, we said made sure the uniqueness of the historic district was clarified. We made sure they understood, despite the Highway 5 area not being a historic district, we wanted it to reflect a character-based development instead of a mishmash of development. We wrote that RFQ. We told them what we wanted, okay? Then they came and told us what we wanted. And all of them said they were going to use the previous plans. It's like none of you were there. They all said that they read our RFQ. It said they were going to use the previous plans. The company I picked was the one that talked about it the most. I didn't pick the company that everyone else picked. But I'm a team player, so I went with them. And one of the reasons this company got picked is because of their unique knowledge of the historic nature of our area. And that's why you guys fell in love with them. That's why you said you liked them.
I did, but they weren't my #1 pick. But that doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. They weren't. But I'm very frustrated when we give a vendor, we write the request for qualifications. We tell them what they want. They present what they're going to do. Then we hire them to do what they're going to do, and now we're questioning what they're going to do.
Well, because we're looking at their contract.
I know, but I'm okay with questioning their contract, but it's like we're reinventing the wheel, and this is very frustrating to me.
This is
It's
nothing.
very frustrating to me that we are pretending that we're planners. I can't plan either one of these areas. None of us up here can do it. And anybody, and I think we have to draw a distinct difference between the long-term strategic plan and the small area plan. The long-term strategic plan is 40,000 feet. This is down there at the grain of sand. It has to be duplicated. All of it has to be duplicated.
What has to be duplicated? What are you talking about?
Everything, because it's down to the grain of sand. You know, so you have to, so if you do a cursory look at this, it's like all this has already been done. It has been done in a technical sense when the last area plan was done. Which year was that for the Village Place?
2010,
2010.
it's comp plan, yeah.
Village Place was 2008.
2008. So we're saying we don't need to update information from 12 years ago. I think that's a huge mistake, okay?
No, that's not what I said.
Huge mistake, huge mistake. We have to start from scratch with information. And then we've never had a plan for Highway 5. So we got to, you know, all we have is a comp plan. And my bigger concern is the contract, is the specifics. I agreed with, frankly, all your points that you made. I went through it and highlighted them. And I agree with changing the contract to make them do what we want them to do. And I told you, I almost changed the RFQ because I felt like they were working the staff too hard and they weren't getting the most out of their engagement. And I said I was going to bring it up at this stage. So I really was going to spend all my time on that, okay? But I'm getting so frustrated that we're reinventing the wheel when we designed the process. We started the process. We had them come in on the dog and pony show. We elected the companies. And now all of a sudden we're questioning everything. It seems weird. I'm okay with questioning the contract. Is the contract doing what we want it to do? Is it reflecting the values of our community, which I think is what a lot of people are saying here. Will their outcomes reflect the values of our community? Is there a way to strengthen the contract so it will reflect the values that you're concerned that they're not appreciating? But what I heard a little bit what Jane's saying was predetermining the outcome. I mean, that's like, you can do whatever you want as long as you don't do this, 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 and this. And I feel like that is a strange way to start. I don't want to predetermine the outcome, because maybe you could stop an outcome that you don't want from happening, but you could stop two other good outcomes by doing that. I think there should be safeguards. I think we have safeguards in the historic district already. Maybe the safeguards aren't as well defined down in the Highway 5 area because it doesn't have the restrictions of the historic district. So I'm all for improving this, and my more concern is when they do engage the public, that they're more prepared, because that's the only problem I saw with the long-term strategic plan. I mean, I felt they were flying in that day and setting up. I wanted them to come in the day before. I really wanted to be more solid, and I didn't want it to be all on the staff. I want the staff to be gravy. Did you feel that that occurred on the long-range strategic plan? I throw out the library plan. I thought that was incompetence, so doesn't even enter my mind, the library plan, but I didn't see that with the long-term strategic plan. And my observation of the previous plans, I didn't see that. I think they're very professional. And if there's direction, if there's something we have a problem with in this contract, I want to fix it, okay? So I'm not saying don't change the contract, but I feel like we're not taking responsibility that we wrote the RFQ. We had them in here. We picked the company. and they're delivering what we said we wanted. And I'm having a little problem with that right now. And I hope you understand that that's what my issue is.
Well, your questions are really to some of the things I said, maybe others that don't like the contract that I'm looking at, right? I mean,
I'm okay with fixing the contract
yeah,
we're looking at.
okay.
But not reinventing the wheel at this point.
I don't know that well, certainly I'm not talking about reinventing the wheel. I think it's, how do we, and Natalie was kind of talking about, how do we, and Judy even so, how do we pare this down or make this a little more focused and yet still have the data
Pare this
gathering
down
and the key
means
points?
there's steps we're not doing.
Right, that's
Pare
right.
this down means,
Key
to me, we're gonna eliminate steps in the process
Yes.
in order to save money and maybe not look at this thing holistically.
No, in order not to go and spend all his time and effort on something we don't need to do.
Why are
really-
you, how do you know we don't need to do it? How do you have a crystal ball like this? That we don't need to do this, we don't need the detail.
I just,
How do you have
I
this
don't know how we are able to communicate. I really don't. I looked at this contract and felt that it did not reflect what we spoke to this contractor, or consultant, sorry.
Let's go through them.
about.
What are they?
It did not reflect what we said we wanted.
Can you name one in the contract?
What, one of the tasks?
Yeah, one of the things you say that they shouldn't do.
How long have you got?
I
But I don't
got
think
all
that's-
night. I got all night. I want to
I
know
don't think
which
that's
one we told them to
where we
do,
wanna
you don't
be.
want them to do.
So I think the whole thing is too much.
Which
And-
one did we tell them to do that you
And
don't want to do?
I'd like to pare it down. I'd like to say to them, we already have enough information to know generally where we want to go with these two areas, and we want you to help us flesh that out with 2 or 3 different options for each small area.
There's no specifics.
Point that might help with some perspective on this, and this is just my observation from what I watched, but, you know, our comprehensive plan process wasn't perfect, but there was a fair amount of public engagement involved in it. And still, at the end of the process, we had a lot of folks coming in here very angry saying that we aren't listening to what the public wants.
Right.
The best way to ensure against that is to insist on engaging the public in this process. Not jump to conclusions that we know what the public wants.
That scares me.
I'm looking at your RFQ, and on page 6, it says a robust public engagement process will be required for development and approval of small area plans.
I don't think anybody was saying we wouldn't have public engagement. I mean, but if you look on,
You're just saying at a different point in the process.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing in here in task 1, 2, 3, or 4 that says we've looked at all the prior plans and here's the gestalt coming out of that, and here's 4 different places and ways we could start, you know, in jumping off of that. I mean, that seems like that synthesis would be valuable.
And I would add to that, and to your point, Jeff, of the robust nature of the public input, it seemed to me that there are, 3 workshops, I think. And, you know, and the last one was for the public, organized at that point, to see what the plan was, or a couple of the ideas of the plan. So I guess, you know, why do 3 workshops help more than moving it along, getting to the point a little more down the road, and having the public input at that point?
Yeah,
And I
and I
may have the
think
sequencing wrong, but, you know.
How do you get public input on the project until you get public input? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, and part of it, I mean, Kevin made the comment that none of us are really qualified to do this plan, and to some degree, we're not really qualified to design the process either. Because we're not professional planners. We have thoughtful thoughts on the process, but I guess I would caution you all not to make a major change to what these professionals are suggesting is appropriate without engaging them in a conversation about it.
Well, I think that's what we're suggesting that y'all might do. I mean, as you,
I'm okay
I
with
don't know
that.
that you're gonna listen, I mean, if we come back and say, we engage, and they say, this is the way it needs to be done, is that gonna be enough?
no, we might need a dialogue.
What did you just say, Judy? I missed what you
I
said.
said we might need a dialogue.
Yeah.
And to that point, I mean, Darren has engaged them, and
Obviously.
and this
Yeah.
is the
Sure.
recommended
Yeah, I mean,
way
we've had
forward.
engagement already. We've already had our planner engage.
And I don't have the expertise in this field of sort of, or planning in general, to be able to necessarily flesh out what I'm about to say, but, you know, Kevin made the observation that you're taking this from the, you know, the 30 or 40,000 foot level down to the granular level.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, part of me is, listen to this, and I think there's some merit to what you're suggesting, Judy, about, well, if we kind of know what the public kind of wants, it's codified in our plans, let's let them analyze that and come back with some suggestions. But I just kind of wonder if they need some granular input before they do that. You know?
I completely understand
know what
that,
you mean
but,
by
but
that.
these
Yeah.
guys are also, like, more detail. But these guys are also experts at this, and so it would seem to me that you could look at all these plans and they could say, here are the hypotheses we need to test. You know, because we've seen it over in Timbuktu, and we've seen it over in Grand Junction. And you might be somewhere in between, you know, based on the resort nature of your community. I mean, let's put their intellect to work early
They have
on.
that in the plan.
That could be done in multiple ways, though. I mean, what you're suggesting could be done, and I think what you're suggesting is show us some schematics or a plan or something that options.
Task 13, refine the preferred plan options.
Another way
It's
might be
there.
to, here's what we think that, you know, if we took this 30,000 foot level and distilled it down to more granular input that's relevant for these two areas, here are some, you know, themes that we think that
Okay with that? I agree with
Yeah,
all
I mean,
that.
task 10 is, you know,
and that would be but rather than saying, let's jump to plans for the community to look at,
Scare me.
I think that's, yeah.
think about, ask them to come in that first engagement with the themes that they think that the plan is telling them are most relevant to these areas that can then be folded into these future plans.
yeah.
I think that's kind of James' point, actually.
Yeah,
They-
and I
they
think the
may have
point is
ideas.
that you don't get to a public workshop until task 10, and it's about visioning. And so and I think that's where it feels like to some people that it's open-ended, wholly open-ended, and versus testing hypothesis or testing themes.
Task 13 is refine the preferred plan options up to 3 and share with the community. So exactly what you want to do is already in the plan.
I know, but it's late, is all I'm saying. It's like,
Okay with discussing the contract, but this just seems awfully late to just,
I would say look at task 4. Task 4, I think, gets at what you're, that's
okay.
that backgrounding, that's talking early on, stakeholder interviews,
no,
focus groups, one-on-one meetings. That's to understand the concerns, provide more clarity, and that's part of that background search. They will have done that background research, that background data, looking at all those plans, coming into that meeting to discuss some of that, to flesh out some of those details.
Task 1, Judy, is where they're reviewing our previous plans. Background, recon and background information collection. So
right,
they're
but
pulling-
that's their study, their analysis.
Right.
But I'm not, what is the output we're getting out of that? And do we get to see that? And what is the thematic emphasis that they've derived from that? I mean, you know, I just, you know, I just think there's nuggets there that we ought to learn much earlier in the process about what they're seeing and what they want to test. And
you
I think-
guys have put in the contract that they have to come back to the council more. You have already
That was another
solidified.
thing I was going to say.
You already
We want
solidified
control,
that as part of this.
and
That
they're
was
not
one of your
giving us
biggest,
control.
your biggest issues, that you made them come back and talk to the
Yeah.
the council, so you're not surprised at the end.
And
I mean,
think,
we
too, if
dealt
you
with all
look-
these things.
If you look at task 10, the last sentence, this is something that we did not have in the comp plan process. So I think maybe address Judy's concern, they will prepare a draft of the presentation for us to review and revise prior to the
Didn't
workshop.
have that.
We did not have that. So if
You guys did a better job than you think you
there's
did.
a little bit, of safeguarding that we put in there. There's also evaluate best practices and precedent images in there. Like you said, maybe it's what this community did or this community did, but, you know, I would say that when we did the new core master plan, we did it, the public engagement was in 2005. So that was 15 years ago. This place
The world's changed.
very
Oh, yeah,
different.
I completely accept that,
Yeah.
and I have no idea about Pinehurst South. I might have
Right.
some thoughts about Village Place, but go figure, right?
Right.
So-
Right. I think maybe it's just, I mean, if
And it also
prior
task,
to that workshop, that first workshop, if there's just a lot of communication,
Maybe that's the
not-
problem,
and not
yeah.
just at the staff level, but at your level. So
Intent.
it's not staff
Just
reviewing
kick off.
that. It needs to,
because task 10 is at the end of the second month.
And I'm hearing like we want more council participation. I'm just trying to think of the big things that matter to us. We're not the first time they've done this. And what if we went to them and said, these are their concerns. Can we build these concerns in here? Like council would like to hear from you more, or we want to make sure you look at our documents, or what. I'm just trying to identify the big things that we can make sure are put in here. And Jeff, you just said something like, we're not planners. I mean, I look at this and I go, I am not qualified to determine whether this is a good contract. But we can say, these are the things that we want to be in here, and make sure those big principles are included in here. I mean, more communication with council and make whatever those things are, the recurring themes that we have here.
And I also want to make sure that we remain in control throughout the process. I don't want to be in a position where they disappear down a hole for a period of months and come back with, excuse me, something that they've put together and say, well, you've got 10 minutes to give your comments on it. No, I want us to be able to see where they're thinking of going, and be able to say, well, you know, not only I like this one better than that one, but all of them are wrong. You're not keeping it Pinehurst.
Trying to avoid a situation where results come back or recommendations come back that in the end we're really not comfortable with.
That's right, absolutely.
Well,
So more engagement earlier on or as it goes along the way of what they're doing. Yeah.
This team appealed to me because of their willingness to listen. But when I read through the contract, what I'm seeing is that we get a few little, you know, short opportunities. They have to be timely. We get one, parenthesis one. How irritating is that? Chance to say, and if we don't turn it around, then too bad. So,
But that's a very standard type
oh,
of
listen,
requirement.
I want to make
contract
sure
format, yeah.
that we're in the driver's seat. The village is in the driver's seat
Jane,
and not the consultant.
you can always be in the driver's seat. The point is, the way they structured their cost fees gives you one turn on those. You want 5 turns, you can have it, you'll pay for it. So absolutely, you can draw outside the lines all you want.
Yeah, I really don't want control as a council member.
Don't
I
want
want to
what?
get, no, I think it's a irresponsible leadership. Your job is to facilitate the mission of the town, honor the historic past in that one section, tried to make sure that that development in that Highway 5 area is not mismatched, just chaotic. I mean, I don't think it's about what I want, because all it's going to be is bars and pizza places. if it is whatever you want, everything I want, okay? I'm trying to exaggerate a point. I don't think it should be what I want.
I think you all thought you should be in control, but
Yeah.
but you should insist on being well-informed on public input, public desires, and expert opinion.
Yes.
To make the decision. Sometimes you're gonna have to make a decision that's in the best interest of the community.
Right.
That might deviate from public input.
Or what
or
you
from-
want.
Or from professional input.
I make decisions on this seat against my own personal interest all the time. And it might happen on this. Might happen on this. This is, I want well, we have an issue. You have state law, you have the public interest. There's a lot of things that boxes that have to be checked. One of them isn't, you got to do what I want. That is not a box that has to be checked. You got to do what Kevin Durham wants. So I'm a little concerned how we use this term. I mean, coming back to us, is that so we could randomly change it from the public engagement? No, that's not what that means. It's coming back to us, and maybe we're saying, yeah, they might have said that, but I think that might be what they meant. Maybe we'd help with clarification. Maybe we, but this is not going to be. You're not in control when you're on the council. You're there to do the right thing, and what is the right thing? It's a bunch of things tied together. I think these are easy because the historic district has an historic rules. So, I mean, that seems to be, a loss of control of that area seems unlikely. So I'm trying to understand what we're scared of there.
Kevin, in answer to your point, I think the concern that I have, maybe some others, is that as I look at this contract now, and with all the tasks that I've talked about, it just seems to be so broad that it's going to take us into areas that I personally feel would be redundant. And I'm not representing my personal view. I'm representing the view of what I think is a reasonable consideration of what
it's broad
the public
to
wants.
It's broad
So,
to get to here. Is it not broad so it can go into a funnel? If it's not, he's right. It needs to be corrected.
well, but you see, I think, and I think this applies particularly to Village Place. I think we're all looking at Highway 5 as still an area to be determined more than Village Place, perhaps. But with Village Place, given what we heard in the comp plan and given other ideas that have been around for a while, I think we're not broad. We know some things that we think we want to accomplish there, and that's where we'd like the consultant to now focus on.
I don't know what they are. Do you know
Well,
what they are? Because I'd like to know. Maybe you got to tell me what we
Well,
want to accomplish there. I think we're kind of lost there.
Well, I think part of the answer to the question is, I think I know what I don't want, or what the public doesn't want.
Okay, well, I understand that.
I don't think,
But you don't know what you want.
I would say.
That's why we have a consultant.
No, what I'm saying is that there's some things that I don't think the public would like to see there. I don't think they would like dense housing there, for example. I think they would like things related to retail that complements what we have in the village now, the core village, let alone other areas, and perhaps some other amenities there. If we get into a library situation, maybe that's a place where a small or large library would go. So I think those are things that are wanted there. It's not dense housing, for example, I would say. Or it's
You know
not.
what you don't want. It sounds like you know what you don't want, but you don't know what you want.
And definitely it's going to take somebody to hear the don't wants and the wants and be able to craft a plan. That
Right.
With the market analysis.
But we just proved the point that none of us here can
Market analysis
create a
is
plan
that.
on what should be there.
Well, Jane, I think a market analysis is an important part of this. Down the road, when we see what is recommended in the options we might be given, what's the market analysis for whatever kind of businesses, apartments,
The
whatever's
market
there?
analysis.
That's where the market analysis comes. That's down the road. It's
Market
like it's down here
analysis
in-
dictates what's built.
It's task number 10 or 12
It should
or
be done
14.
first.
It's,
So what
it's
is the
number
way?
6.
For SMART, they're gonna be doing market analysis parallel to their plan.
Yeah,
Parallel or
You don't wanna
first.
get down to,
Yeah.
having developed a detailed plan.
You have a
to find out
plan,
it's
and then the
not feasible.
market won't sustain it.
all right. So what I'm hearing is some ideas here, a way, I think Judy mentioned it, to have a dialogue with the consultant about some of these concerns that I think most of us have, and see if there's a way to refocus or focus a little differently the contract from what we're reading today? Is that a
I
fair
don't have
statement?
those concerns, so
There's
you're gonna have to get it from
specific-
them.
Okay.
Can you give us some direction?
I have
Are there
no direction for you.
specific tasks that you have issue with that we need to revisit?
I'm happy with
Or
it.
is it every single task that they've put in here?
This is where I was looking for some guidance, excuse me, from you guys, because like I said, I don't know if all this stuff is necessary, but every planner is different. I liked them when they came, I liked their presentation, I thought they'd do a great job for us, but does this reflect what I heard from them? And to Kevin's point, what we asked for in the RFQ.
And I'm okay with that,
And
too.
I just, and you guys have convinced me we need 2 reports, not 1. I did notice they told us at the start that we wouldn't have to pay for reimbursables. Now they're saying we have to pay for reimbursables, but that's small. I'm not smart enough or experienced enough to know what in here might need to come out. I mean, I think you've all heard that council wants more input, or, I mean, what was it?
So I think two things we could do. Each of us could give Natalie and Darren some specifics, because they can't read our minds. Unfortunately, they cannot. So I've always wanted somebody to do that, but, so I think it's incumbent upon us, if we have some specific edits and changes, that we document those and share them. Some of us have shared some general conversations, some specific, but we need to get that together. Having heard what we've had to say, you also may have some ideas
Love to hear that.
about what you think we should ask for and interject at an earlier point or whatever. But I think the thing is that the feeling I'm getting is that we, based on everything we just, in fact, recently done, and I absolutely appreciate that was at a 40,000-foot level, and now we're going to dive down to ground zero, that there's stuff we should be able to leverage and get their input on at an earlier point.
We demanded that in our RFQ, for them to leverage that.
It's in their process.
We already gave it to
It
them.
is,
one,
but
yeah.
to your point, Judy, I mean, I'm looking at task 1. I mean, I think they could expand task 1 and be very specific. You will review these sections of the comprehensive plan. You will review these, you know, these exactly.
I agree with that.
I think there's some,
And give us some feedback, yeah. Okay.
I think there's a way that I think we can accomplish
Okay.
Well, I think
some of that.
one of the things I'll do, I would encourage everybody, go through the 21 tasks, and I'll circle the
One by
ones that
one.
I think are redundant or maybe not as important in
You
my
have to do more
evaluation
than
of this.
circle. You have to
Excuse
write
me?
it down.
Well, yeah, and yeah. But that's a way to kind of focus on the
Yeah.
things that seem to be most problematic from my point of view as I'm looking at this, from what I hope we'll be able to accomplish in the end.
And I'm going to
We'll see
focus
what
on
that-
the problematic thing that I saw, which is the use of staff. On every instance where staff is engaged, and there's an assumption that you guys are doing stuff in that last round. I didn't appreciate that. So I'm going to be singularly focused on that in this document, and I'll give you that in writing.
But I'd say we all need to give you our comments by close of business Thursday.
About what? You'll need to do what?
Give them our comments by close of business Thursday.
Yeah, I'll do that.
You two said, you said the long-range comprehensive plan process wasn't perfect. If there were any things we did wrong in there you thought it should be done better?
Well, when I look at that general process, and Darren, you jump in, you've been through more small area plans than I have. But the process is, you start, like you said, way up here, vision. Do you want retail? Do you want, small grocery? Do you need, 2-floor condo units? What do you want? What's the vision? And then you funnel down, to the specifics. And I think it's a planner best practice to do what they've done.
Yes.
You start with what's the general vision, Then you come back and say, okay, this is the vision, here's some options, the way that we could achieve that vision. Here's a couple choices, get feedback from the public. Do these choices, meet the needs of the community? Is this what the community wants? They choose, and then they come back with the final. It's a pretty
Standard planning practice.
Standard planning process.
She asked if there was some improvements in previous process.
The lesson that I learned during comp plan is that we did not I don't feel like we came back to council often enough. I felt like the
And we
consultant.
fixed that in here.
To your point, the consultant flew in night before, flew right out, and was not engaging you. And part of it too was we didn't have a professional planning director. So I was doing the best I could, but I'm not a planner either.
That's the point.
Did really good.
But is
I'm not
that
a
built
planner
into
either.
here?
Yeah.
So
That shortcoming built into here?
yes, the check
Also
back
builds
in
into,
with you. So
I didn't feel they engaged with you guys enough on the ground, which probably parallels to that engagement gap with us.
yes,
So
it
I
does.
think if we fix the engagement with staff and council, then,
Just the
that's the only
fact
thing I
that-
want to fix.
Just the fact that we can review their workshop presentations and provide revisions ahead of time means we see them ahead of time. So like,
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
did
and
not
that's a
happen.
good point as you
Did
get down
not
the road.
happen
Right,
before.
and that's
I
a good
mean-
point as you get down the road to the ending task numbers.
Yeah, it was
So-
just in time
it was,
for the prezzo.
right.
Yeah, I'm more comfortable with you guys seeing it ahead of time than me, even though obviously it's built in for
I have a
us.
job to do too, I think.
Yeah.
and
So let's get
participate.
comments to Darren and, straight to Darren, I guess, would be the best way, by Thursday afternoon, with the idea that from that, we'll see kind of where all the ideas are focused on that, with the idea to have a dialogue with the consultant on some of these issues we might want to change, and see if that's even practical from their point of view. They may say, heck, no, can't, this is all, I can't do it, or yes, I could, and we did this in Columbia, South Carolina, or wherever else, in that, in
So,
changing.
so just trying to think through.
Yeah,
how
we
this
got to
might
think through it.
work. So you all are gonna send this to Darren, and then at the staff level, we're gonna be looking for areas of consensus to engage the,
Yeah, it'd have to be areas of consensus. You couldn't just randomly do what somebody wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean,
We can have
you
a
got to
couple-
get our input, you got to give your own, and then you can send back to us, okay, here's how we want to amend this.
Can I just add one thing about the whole contract itself? The most important part of this contract is the end product that we're getting out of this contract. All those tasks 1 through 16, all lead up to that phase 3 where we start to develop those final area plans and reports. That's where all the engagement occurs, all that previous engagement, all those previous revisions that have made between you, the client, and them. That all leads to the development of those final, those small area plans and the form-based code. So all those tasks that they identified, we can talk about whether you think they're necessary, but from their standpoint, from their experience, from developing previous plans, these are all necessary steps into getting that final product. So I'm just telling you that as a little
going
kind of
back
background
to
as
my
a
point
planner.
earlier, I mean, we're sitting here thinking, we're looking at this plan and saying, well, maybe we don't need to do all this stuff, but the reality is, they've been through this dozens of times.
Yeah.
I think we should expect that, while they're a commercial entity and they've got their own interests, they understand what processes work better than we do. We're just guessing. So I just ask you to remember that.
And also on Novus, you've seen, we've loaded up their previous plans, for an example. You see, the product that they're kind of, the road that they're taking down, those products are gonna look similar to, our product is gonna look similar to some of those products. But again, it's with public engagement. I think public engagement is a key part of this process.
Well, it's,
My point is that I'm not trying to find ways to put more work on the staff. I'm trying to find ways to make the consultant that we hire as efficient and focused as possible to achieve its goals so that they achieve our goals.
Yeah.
So let's try this and see what we can do on that.
I don't want to miss the mission. Form-based codes at the end of this. I'm scared that if we do any trimming, we lose the big prize of having the tools to move towards form-based codes. So I'm worried about that price. But I wanted to make a note that Judy made, and maybe you could articulate it better, Judy. You know, the 5,000 cost on the PDO cursory, why start it so late? Why not start it earlier? I thought that was an interesting comment that you made. I guess you're going to remake it, right, when you have to send it in
Well,
Thursday?
I think what
Yeah.
Darren described earlier is that it's just an assessment. And that's good to underscore that. But I would do that sooner than later.
Yeah,
Because it's sitting out there. Because when they're thinking about what they're going to do, here's the framework we have to get things done today, and here's all the different other things that we've thought of in the past for how we might develop our community. I'm not sure why hang it out there so late.
That will that generally starts as they start to firm up the regulating plan and the form-based code. Then you have to really start to look at how are you going to implement that. They'll start to look at what are those impediments with that PDO. So it usually gets picked up a little bit later in the process, but a full PDO assessment, I'd have to talk to them to see when they think is the best time to actually look at, if we were interested in that. They're going to do a PDO assessment in order to implement.
That's like $5,000. That's what she was talking about.
To remove inconsistencies with what these new changes.
Yeah, okay, so it's not really looking at our PDO per se.
Yeah, that optional thing that they put on
Pause,
there, the 5,000, that was for the entire PDO to look at, similar to the Lawrence Group thing that was done in 2011, where
Love
they
that
came in
idea.
and looked at and did an assessment of the PDO.
Okay, I think I just misunderstood.
Several meetings ago, the mayor was empowered to keep work sessions to a certain time limit and discussions therein to a certain time limit. So I'm going to exercise that. We've gone a little beyond it, and I think this was very helpful. And there's one other issue I just want to raise before we go into a closed meeting. But Natalie, thank you very much, and Darren.
Thanks,
that's
Natalie.
good. I think we know what we need to try to do. I'd sent a note around to the council and to Jeff a couple days ago saying that, we've got only a few meetings left at the end of the year, not that that's the top off of everything, because obviously there's a January and a February. But, so in that light, here are some things I think we might want to do, but I want your input, and maybe we should schedule them sooner or later. So just quickly, future meeting, regular meeting, work session, whatever, presentations. Would you like to hear from the CVB? We haven't had them here in quite a long time. Would you like to hear from PIP, Partners in Progress? PIP. Would you like to hear from the Airport Authority, which is doing a survey now about what?
I feel like we have too much work to do, John. I don't know if you feel the same, but I'm a team player, whatever you think. I mean, I like them all, but I feel like the start of next year.
Well, except that we're coming up on our retreat.
Okay, yeah, what would help us with our retreat?
There's some data there that.
What do you think would help us with our retreat?
I mean,
Well, I think they all would, but I think the CVB issue is one that's I'd like to see. I mean, just getting to know them better and having Phil come and tell us what their marketing is. Now, you're going to be attending a meeting on Thursday. Maybe that's sufficient for that. But what do the rest of you think? Are these organizations you'd like to hear from? And if so, sooner or later? Judy? Jane?
I mean, out of context of all the things that we've got for the rest of our agenda, I don't know. I don't know that I see it. Yeah.
All right. I'm not hearing a lot of support for presentations from those units, so we'll work that into some other time.
I'd love to
by
roll up.
pre-agreement.
I've taken the note, and as I'm looking at future agendas, if it looks like there's a light agenda, maybe I can,
Yeah.
try to line
Oh,
up.
that'd be a good way.
Sure.
Keep the light agenda?
No, we'll talk about that, Jeff. All right, subject matter, however, that we need to work with on the staff. We didn't get to the fund balance discussion. My which we were going to try to do in August, my recommendation is that becomes part of our retreat in December, pretty obviously.
I think that's a great
That's
time.
the way to do it. And then we come back to this issue of the updates, at least short-term updates to the PDO, because of what we're hearing from the USGA and the things we learned in the Floyd Way process.
Which we would have
and all of that. So,
had that discussion before Darren left.
well, no, I didn't want to do that tonight. This is for for the future. So fund balance, maybe that becomes part of our retreat, and the sort of urgency for the PDO updates related to things we're thinking about that may be pressuring us from the USGA's coming here, and the lessons learned from the Floyd Way project.
Can that be a
I
closed
don't
session?
recall where that comment originated, but Natalie and Darren and I did touch base briefly on that a couple of weeks ago, and it was perplexing to us. We didn't understand why we thought we needed, why the USGA project, for example, would be
I guess that gets into issues
changes to our PDO.
of zoning or rezoning, if we have the
That's
ability to
just
do
really
that
a
in certain
conditional
areas.
zoning.
But if you change the PDO, well, certainly if you change the PDO after you get an application, it doesn't apply anyway.
Well, that's the point, yeah,
Yeah.
or building moratoriums or development, you know, that sort of thing. That,
So that's a different, that is, I mean, and that's a very good subject that we haven't resolved yet, but particularly with regard to these small area plans and in particular
yeah,
the development pressure we're continuing to see along the Highway 5, Pinehurst South area, in that area, a moratorium might be appropriate until we can get these small area plans done and implementing code language and all that stuff as well, so.
And the other thing for the pre-retreat or retreat, I'd say, Darren clearly talked about being understaffed and not being able to get to things. So is there a consultant that can bridge some of that gap that could get us, I mean, Natalie made it sound like there have been text amendments piling up for 10 years.
There are a few that,
Yeah, so, I mean, let's clean that up, push it through.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to wait for, redigesting everything.
The county makes it a habit of having quarterly updates. So on their agendas, every quarter, Deborah Ensminger and Teresa Thompson, who are their planning folks, bring in a list of mop-up things to do, and they're going through it systematically.
Yeah.
And maybe we could do something like that, but
So we don't
one
lose
of my
sight of it.
one of
Yeah.
my concerns is with the USGA coming, it's going to attract developers who want a piece of the action, and we need to have our act together.
Need to have two
Need to have
small
these
area
two
plans.
That
small area
maybe
Two
we
plans.
small area plans done.
What?
These
The
two small area plans need to be done.
That's
It-
where this development can occur. I mean, everything else is
well,
spoken
that's,
for.
that, we, yeah, that's.
Yeah.
we need to move
Well,
on that.
I think we're all,
We-
I
we
think we're
need
in
to-
furious agreement.
Yeah.
So, well, I think there is an issue here then about, I call it the PDO, but it's really what to do about the USGA, the moratoriums, whatever our options are. So maybe we can get that done before the retreat even, because that would help us think about some things in the retreat, perhaps.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I think we should
So we'll
have
focus on
coffee
that.
together, you and me, Judy. You and I should have coffee. We should have coffee. We should get together. I mean, there's not, I don't want to, I mean, I'm not trying to do anything. That has been a standard way to communicate deep subject matter. Just talk to each other in a one-on-one setting. Maybe that's what we're going to have to do. Maybe we're
I'm all
going to
for
have to
that,
spend
yeah.
some time.
Sure.
Maybe that's going to have to be the only answer, because we're running out of some time here.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't mean to make, December 31st isn't, the world doesn't
It
end.
does
but-
feel like,
But
yeah,
leading up
stressful.
to the retreat especially,
Yeah.
there's some of these things might play a role. I think we know what that is now.
We have to do that.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn the work session?
I move to recess the work session and enter into a closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-318.11, little a, little 6 in parens, to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character. Is this the one we're doing? No.
Yeah,
It's all there.
Okay.
two things,
Okay.
topics there.
All right, sorry. Fitness and conditions of appointment of an individual public employee. Specifically, the council will discuss the village manager's performance review and pursuant to NCGS 143-318.11, little a in parens, little 3 in parens, to consult with the village attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the village attorney and the village council.
Motion by Judy Davis, second by Lydia Bosch. We'll now move to a closed meeting.